just beneath the veneer of civilization, waiting 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 just beneath.
Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices.
We don't live in a free world if we can't reveal facts about how we're being deceived by corrupt authoritarian governments and the billionaire oligarchs they serve.
Life was so beautiful. Oh, why does it feel so good to be so bad?
If their lies and crimes continue to go unchecked, the new planetary control grid they're putting into place, with 5G networks, nanotechnology, robotics, and the Internet of Things, will soon corral us into a technocratic tyranny administered by unaccountable AI systems.
Where most of us will be about as free as Julian Assange.
As Julian Assange.
As Julian Assange.
They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain.
The world of appearances is always fooling us.
London doesn't look like the most corrupt place on earth, but it's the global capital of money laundering for organised crime. The clownish, kid-friendly host of BBC shows like Top of the Pops and Jim Will Fix It, Jimmy Savile, was a close friend of Prince Charles and knighted by the Queen, but in secret he raped hundreds of children and had a ghoulish side career as a necrophiliac. Savile stole the glass eyes from corpses that he had molested and had them set in silver so he could wear the eyes as rings on his fingers. Another multi-millionaire rapist of children, Jeffrey Epstein, had a hallway festooned with glass eyes in what has been described as one of the largest private homes in Manhattan.
A 21,000 square foot mansion on the Upper East Side that had been given to Epstein
for free by his billionaire pal, Les Wexner. In a world where everyone is under surveillance and everything they do can be known, you can't credibly suggest that the FBI, NSA, CIA, MI5, GCHQ, MI6 and the British royal family didn't know exactly what was going on there. They were, at the very least, complicit and more likely, enablers. It's often hard to determine if the rich and powerful are evil or just insatiably greedy and short-sighted. Either way, the pixels are starting to show on this simulation. Costly, endless wars that serve no purpose other than to loot natural resources, strip the assets from a bomb-addled populace, and enrich transnational corporations. State-sponsored sex trafficking, false flag mass shootings, and intelligence agency-assisted drug smuggling, exponentially accelerating species extinction caused by the unimpeded destruction of the ecosystem, and full-spectrum narrative control in an AI-enhanced establishment media that would have us laughing at poisons while they silence all whistleblowers and persecute truth-tellers.
Our self-styled overlords aren't experiencing a momentary lapse in reason here, or a temporary deficit in empathy. Their moral bankruptcy is complete. Their ethics-free barbarity is on infinite loop. Let's take a moment to think about how this upside-down clown world operates. For those who spew lies, the world becomes a playground. For those who seek truth, the world becomes a prison. Each of us falls somewhere on that spectrum, oscillating between self-aggrandizement and self-abnegation. But we all know that in this world, the shrewd, amoral, lying elites catch all the breaks. It's a game rigged for sociopaths and control freaks.
Nearly 8 billion human beings now occupy the Earth.
Those who value truth over mass deception must sometimes wonder why they're here. If you had full control over your own destiny, would you have willingly incarnated into a realm
where intelligence agencies use children as sex slaves to manipulate world affairs? A realm where a mobbed-up megalomaniac like Donald Trump could become leader of the most powerful military nation ever known?
A realm where weaponized weather modification systems and an evil, intelligent dust made of nanotechnology serves the sociopathic whims of profiteering disaster capitalists?
A realm where dissent is being criminalized while an epidemic of gangsterism masquerades as democratic government?
Those are questions worth asking, don't you think?
Questions worth asking, don't you think?
The people, my people, are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
They don't got 여기저기 손들어 나 여기 와서 흔들어 우리 같이 춤추자 자 이제 너도 흔들어 여기서 다 내려놔 나 얼른 와서 따라해 여기다 손 흔들어 나 지금부터 흔들어 춤추자
Would you have willingly incarnated into a realm where intelligence agencies use children as sex slaves to manipulate world affairs?
Now they're saying anybody who questions the narrative around Jeffrey Epstein's suicide is a conspiracy theorist. So we're also talking today with journalist Whitney Webb. She is going to explain to us about the two co-conspirators that are most likely to be prosecuted now that Jeffrey Epstein has committed suicide. So why haven't they been charged with anything? Whitney Webb will break all of that down for us. All of it today on Truth in Media. Well, only days ago, 16 victims of convicted billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein were allowed a day in court to explain how Epstein had harmed them and raped them. This on the same day that prosecutors in the case asked the judge to formally dismiss the charges against Epstein now that he's dead. Well, meanwhile, Epstein's own lawyers are asking the judge to investigate this death. Now, while the media has been covering Epstein's so-called suicide, many continue to call anyone who questions Epstein's unbelievably suspicious death a conspiracy theorist. How convenient, right? But one of the big problems with this smear is that each time we look into this case, two things, they really become more clear. Number one, for years, media outlets helped to protect Jeffrey Epstein, even rewrite the story around him. We're going to show that to you. And two, more signs that Epstein's death is much more than we're being told.
As soon as there's an agent that can share information strategically for an intention, then I don't know if what they're sharing is reflective of reality or reflective of what they think will advance their intention. And that's kind of the key distinction, is that the moment we get abstract signaling, which language allows us, and the ability to kind of forecast and our ability to model each other, And your well-being and the basis of your agency doesn't seem coupled with my well-being and the basis of my agency perfectly. In the case of the partner wanting to cheat and get away with it, right, there's a decoupling of well-being and agency. In the case of if I'm a marketer of a product and I want you to purchase it, whether my product is actually the best product or not, whether a competitor's product is better, whether you need the product or not, I want you to think that you need it and to think that mine is the best, right? So there's a breakdown between what seems to be in my well-being and what seems to be in your well-being. So wherever there's any misalignment in agency, and there's the ability to share signal for strategic purposes, then you have a basis to have signal that's being shared that isn't just truthful, right? So then we look at, well, where is that happening? And it's fucking everywhere.
Vox Media wrote an article about how anyone with a blue check on Twitter should not be allowed to spread conspiracies about Epstein's death. And yet a New York Times report now shows this, that news outlets like Forbes, the National Review, and HuffPo, they accepted money after Epstein's 2008 guilty plea to sex with an underage girl to run stories meant to reform his image. These stories were multiple puff pieces casting the deceased financier as an intelligent and selfless businessman with a passion for science. And while Epstein was indeed a philanthropist, these articles failed to mention his criminal past or current controversies. All three articles referenced since that report had been deleted, but the New York Times included quotes from each. The Forbes article posted in 2013 praised him as one of the largest backers of cutting-edge science around the world. The National Review piece from the same year called him a smart businessman with a passion for cutting-edge science. The HuffPo article in 2017 credited him for taking action to help a number of scientists thrive during the Trump era. So what you need to know, and what we all need to ask ourselves, why would we believe any news outlet like CNN or Vox that now suddenly wants to attack anyone who questions how Jeffrey Epstein died or his intelligence community connections?
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything.
So the first thing is withholding information. And we see in business how much focus is on IP and NDAs and those types of things. But then it's not simply withholding information, it's also disinforming, right? Just like the poker bluff of the fake left and go right, we have and we can see in warfare, we try and have black projects where we withhold the information because we don't want the other side to know what our military capacities are, but we also try to disinform what our military capacities are or where we're going to attack or whatever else as a source of advantage. And that's been happening forever. Sun Tzu writes about that, right? I mean, it's just, we've had a basis for disinformation for a long time. We've had rivalrous dynamics for a long time. The rivalrous dynamics are a basis by which we can get ahead by war and killing somebody else, or lying to them, right? Or ruining the commons. It's just exponential tech leads to, with those same incentives, leads to exponential disinformation. Exponential extraction, exponential pollution, exponentially scaled warfare, and on a finite playing field, that self-destruct. So the underlying cause is the same stuff that's been happening, but at a speed and scope and scale and level of complexity that forces us to have to actually deal with the underlying structures now because they can't continue.
So do I think he was killed? 100%. Yes, I do. Because he made his whole living blackmailing people. Yeah. There were a lot of men in those planes, a lot of men who visited that island, a lot of powerful men who came into that apartment.
Where were you, CNN and Vox, when they chose not to report on his non-existent prison sentence, or when they chose to ignore the presidents, the princes, and the powerful, with whom Epstein continued to surround himself even as he continued to abuse young girls.
Between Epstein's ill-gotten fortune and Maxwell's connections, these two scumbags were able to gain access and influence to some of the most powerful people in the world. Some of the celebrities in Jeffrey Epstein's 90-page address book include Alec Baldwin, Tony Blair, Elizabeth Hurley, Michael Bloomberg, John Cleese, Bill Collins, Prince Andrew, a bunch of Kennedys, Henry Kissinger, Courtney Love, Cheryl Mills, who worked both with Bill and Hillary Clinton and Obama, Rupert Murdoch, Prince Charles, Prince Salman, George Soros' son Peter, Kevin Spacey, Ivana and Ivanka Trump, and Chris Tucker. Other friends include Bill and Hillary Clinton, Alan Dershowitz, Chelsea Handler, Katie Couric, George Stephanopoulos, Woody Allen, former president of Harvard Larry Summers, Harvey Weinstein, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and even the late Stephen Hawking.
Some of us covered it for years. Did you? That's Reality Check. Let's talk about it on social media while we still can. So let me introduce Whitney Webb, an independent journalist. She writes for Mint Press News and also has written for truthandmedia.com and has been following the Epstein case for several years now. And Whitney, as we take a look at this case, the name that jumps out is Leslie Wexner, and yet media wants to ignore him, including Chris Cuomo over at CNN, who said this just the other day.
When we're talking about Epstein, you got to stick to what is common sense on these things, all right? Don't get buried in legalese. Don't follow the finger pointing, and please don't get caught up in the intrigue of who was better friends with this guy. Who cares?
The day before his death, they had these new documents that were finally released by the court, and we saw some new names in there that we hadn't necessarily heard before, like New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico, and once UN ambassador. And since that time, it seems like a lot of those names, there's been no talk about them virtually at all in the mainstream, as well as digging into any of those documents. It's as if those documents were released and then his death conveniently seemed to kind of end all the talk about those other contacts, did it not?
Yeah, that's pretty much the case. So those documents that were released were part of a civil case that was between one of Epstein's victims and Ghislaine Maxwell, and it was a partial release that was actually being sought mainly by Alan Dershowitz, who's accused of raping these girls, and he allegedly, according to the victims anyway, was trying to get this partial release in order to reveal the identity of more of the victims in order to target and intimidate them, something he was known to do in the past and actually hired former FBI Director Louis Freeh to do for him. But what happens with the death of Jeffrey Epstein coming a day after this, I think, is significant because it means that the criminal case that was against him goes away. And what that means is that all of the evidence obtained, any sort of electronic documentation, photographic evidence, things of that nature, will not be made public now unless another co-conspirator is charged in the case. And I think that's very significant because we know that his New York home was raided. Even though other residences of his have not been raided, we can assume that significant amounts of evidence potentially implicating powerful people was found in the course of this investigation. And now that that criminal case has died with Epstein, that will not be made public. And the fact that they're telling us now to look away from other co-conspirators that could be charged and keep that case going, I think is again just really spelling out what they want us to avoid looking at, and how this is about keeping more damaging information that could implicate more powerful people from coming out into the public.
It almost feels as if by dismissing the case against him, it certainly limits the process going forward for prosecutors. Do I have that right, or is that incorrect?
To an extent, but given the fact that people of what we know about the activities of Ghislaine Maxwell and Leslie Wexner, for example, and the operation Epstein was running, and based on just what the victims themselves have said.
It ended with sexual abuse and intercourse, and then a pat on the back. You've done a really good job. Thank you very much, and here's $200. Before you know it, I'm being lent out to politicians and to academics and to people that royalty and people that you would never think, how did you get into that position of power in the first place if you're this disgusting, evil, decrepit person on the inside?
Hi, this is Johnny Carson asking, you have a daughter who's a really good-looking chick. Well, you may be able to change her life and improve your financial status, because Prince Andrew is looking for a new girlfriend. Just drop a nude photo of your little nymphette in a self-addressed stamped envelope and mail it to Royal Affair, Buckingham Palace, London.
I think there's definitely enough evidence to bring charges against Ghislaine Maxwell at the very least. And there's lots of indications as well that Leslie Wexner was really financing this whole operation, and that as people have looked into this after Epstein's arrest in July, it has come out, or it has become more apparent that Epstein was not actually a billionaire, that all of his wealth seemed to have come really just directly from Leslie Wexner as his only publicly acknowledged client. Wexner is accused of raping these girls as well, as is Ghislaine Maxwell. And Wexner's ties to Epstein go back very far. Epstein had a power of attorney over lots of Wexner's affairs. Epstein and Wexner together were involved in a CIA front company together, Southern Air Transport, and were responsible for relocating that company to Columbus, Ohio, have been involved in this for a very long time. The New York residence where Epstein was abusing these girls was provided to Epstein for essentially free by Wexner, who bought the property, installed recording equipment in it that was later used for blackmail by Epstein. And he also received a plane from Wexner. So the involvement of these players is very clear, but I think this part of this goes back to the sweetheart deal that Epstein had originally received in 2007, which essentially protected his co-conspirators from being charged and sort of placed all the blame on Epstein, and then Epstein got a slap in the wrist. And what we're seeing now is that now that Epstein is dead, all of the blame for this operation is being placed on Epstein now that he is out of the picture, and charges can no longer be pressed against him, which is quite convenient for the network of which he was a part.
In many ways, as you said, Wexner was kind of providing the avenues by which a lot of this abuse took place.
Absolutely. And Wexner also has not, he has claimed that he was defrauded by Epstein, but has not provided evidence to support that case. And we do know that right before Epstein went to jail the first time, he transferred $46 million to Wexner. That's the opposite of stealing. Right. And there's been no pushback from the mainstream media on that, which I think is really troubling. And, it's not really surprising either. If you look back into Wexner's history, he has associations with organized crime, and was implicated in a 1985 murder of the lawyer representing Wexner's company, The Limited, whose name was Arthur Shapiro. This came out by accident. It was a highly suppressed police report. It was obtained by accident and as part of a public information inquiry by a local journalist, and it revealed that Wexner was deeply tied to organized crime, had all these sorts of associations with tax evasion and other things, and we know that Epstein was involved in that same sort of shady financial activity as well. And going forward, as I mentioned, they both got involved with Southern Air Transport. The Ohio Inspector General at the time thought that they were both working with the CIA and smuggling things, and they called Southern Air Transport's route that was established on Wexner's behalf between Hong Kong and Columbus, Ohio, the Mayor Lansky run, of course referencing Mayor Lansky, the notorious American mobster, and suggesting that this air transit route that had been established between Wexner and Epstein and Southern Air Transport was being used for smuggling, but he didn't say what it was. But one can speculate as to what that illicit cargo may have been. So the fact that Wexner hasn't been implicated in this and they're not going after him, I think if they did, it would reveal some of those more sordid connections where intelligence becomes a factor or organized crime becomes a factor. And once you start pulling on some of those threads, it could really create a lot of problems for the status quo.
I think it's everyone's responsibility in the world to not let our children grow up in an era where sex trafficking is the most profitable industry in the world. It's a $100 billion profit a year just on human trafficking, just on modern-day slavery. How is that not being talked about? How is that even happening?
I do believe in spooks. I do believe in spooks. I do believe in spooks. I do.
You believe in more than that before I finish with you.
I want to ask you about this. Two big stories that are basically coinciding with each other. And the Clintons are at the center of both things. You have the Epstein thing, and they got him because was he running a blackmail operation? Was he intel like Acosta, former labor secretary, said? Bill Clinton wrote down on what's widely branded as the Lolita Express to what has been widely branded as either Pedophile Island or Orgy Island. I mean, and then you have Hillary Clinton on the other side paying for a dossier that they used illegally for FISA warrants to try to kick the president out of office, and all the people involved with that. But what about what's going on? How can this disrupt the system?
As Dr. Farrell would say, I'm going to engage in some high-octane speculation.
Okay.
So as you know, I believe at the end of fiscal 1997, beginning of fiscal federal 1998, they started to engineer a federal coup d'etat.
Yeah,
and that's the trillion. It started to go missing. And I was warned by the president of CalPERS it was going to start to happen that fall, and sure enough, it did. Now, if you look at what happened in anticipation of that in 95, 96, 97, I will bet you $1, Greg, that they used the money that they were pulling out of HUD to capitalize Epstein and the Clinton Foundation at approximately the same time.
Oh my God! Whoa! Back up! Hold on. Back up.
Yeah.
I'm going to get this right. You think that the Clinton Fraud Foundation, which everybody knew about, was fraudulent? I mean, they stole up to $4 or $5 billion from Haiti after the earthquake, and nobody said a word. But you're saying that the Clinton Fraud Foundation is total fraud because it was never filled out the paperwork to be the foundation. It was an archival library.
Clinton Foundation was created to launder a portion of the money that they were pulling out of HUD and DOD. And I believe some of that money was pulled out. Some of the initial money pulled out of HUD. The first $59 billion was used to capitalize Epstein and the Clinton Foundation. If you're going to run a laundry that is that big and that global, not only do you need a plane flying around making as many stops as Epstein and the Clintons did, but you need a control file operation. And I think Epstein was a part of the control file operation.
Hold on. So Clinton Foundation, money laundering operation, Epstein, a control file operation to keep everybody quiet.
Right, but hold up. One of the most significant parts of that control file operation was running a pornography plus entrainment online operation, because a lot of people, you're going to get the rich with Epstein, but you need something that's a lot more efficient and low cost to get all the government accountants and government bureaucrats and all sorts of people, particularly in the government position. So I think they ran a corollary pornography operation, basically, you know, to because if you're going to take 21 trillion and have it go missing, or you're going to launder it in and around the federal government, Greg, do you have any idea how much having control files saves you in terms of getting the job done?
So what do they do with the guys at the lower people? Just catch them, you know, like the SEC watching porn? I can't imagine.
If I can get you watching on porn, particularly on a government computer, all I have to do, no, I get you, because remember, you're using entrainment to create an addiction.
Yeah, not at home. You're talking about on a government at work.
Right. I start bringing you into sites where I use underage actresses or actors. Okay. And now I've got you on a criminal. So I've got a control file that can embarrass you, that can cause you to lose your job, possibly your pension, but I've also got you on criminal. And I've done it very, very low cost and efficiently, because remember, you're paying me to watch, or somebody's paying me to run ads while you're watching. So this is a for-profit generator of fantastic amounts of control files. So if you can combine an Epstein for the wealthy and powerful with, you know, pornography operations, you can build a control file presence, which is very, very significant.
Blackmail is alive and well. You're going to see a lot of people all of a sudden decide to quit Congress. All of a sudden, out of nowhere. Why? What happened? Blackmail is a tough thing. It's not made in the open. People don't know about it. You know. I mean, a lot of stuff. It's as old as the oldest profession. It might be the oldest profession. Now, how do you tell somebody that we have to go back into history from the beginning of time? From the beginning of time, since man looked up to the heavens and became medieval and began and looked into blood sacrifice and, you know, the idea of sacrificing virgins to volcanoes, and you think, oh my God, that's the craziest stuff. We never improved upon it. I want you to understand this premise. Man has not improved from the days of the Druids to just go back. Nothing has changed from Caligula to the Romans.
If only all Rome had just one neck.
Follow what I'm saying. The tendencies to do things, the tendencies to consume, to slaughter, to harm, to hurt, to sacrifice children, the prostitution, sexual profligacy, and depravity, and the fall of Rome, and they talked about it in the Bible. It's not gone. It's here today. It wears a suit and a tie. It's here. Nothing's changed. When you get into the depravity of such, nobody wants to hear this. It almost sounds crazy sane. If I could go out and get 1 million people to truly understand the depravity of mankind, that the same people who did terrible things in days of yore are alive today, doing it to women and children and people today.
You know about sexual predators and things like that. I mean,
you are one.
All right, I was going to say that.
If I can get that news, if I can say, listen to what I am saying. You don't want to hear these things because it bothers you to hear this terrible stuff about Satanism and Luciferian and people who don't necessarily even have names for this. The Epsteins, the predation against children and women and people, that is as old as mankind. Our symbolism, our symbology, the semiotics, the way we see things. If I could go out and convince people to explain to them, this is who the royals are. This is what G7. I know, but nobody's going to want to. G7. Come on, stop. G7 in the Academy Awards.
We saw your boobs. And Hathaway, we saw your boobs in Brokeback Mountain. Ladies and gentlemen, the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles.
Bilderberg, Mont Pelerin. You understand that? Which is the Bilderberg for von Mises and the Milton Friedman type of libertarian folk. These groups of people, fraternities, handshakes. You have to understand the depravity, because if you think that we're better off, if you think that society has advanced, if you think that mankind is beyond that, if you think that we have moved beyond this, you're out of your mind.
Look at Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick, who you better believe got invited to things like this. And there's names very similar to George Soros in it, as, the bad guy character. And his wife, he finds out, is really an occultist. And he died a day after refusing to cut 24 minutes of it. Well, they cut it.
Kubrick died just days after his original cut was presented to the studio. Although he had secured complete creative control over the film, the studio refused to show whatever was in those 24 minutes. Many believe the Hollywood elites, angry over his expose, murdered Stanley Kubrick so that they could edit the film, and there would be no way he could ever reveal what was in the original version. Most believe Harford saw something profoundly disturbing at the ritual, perhaps a literal sacrifice or other such bizarre type material. Still, others speculate Kubrick may have exposed the satanic elite's use of children in their bizarre rituals as well. Elite child trafficking rings have come to light in Belgium, the UK, the US, and other countries, proving there's a much more sinister side to these secret parties. Was this what Kubrick was really trying to warn us about? He had already alluded to this theme when Bill goes to the costume shop and encounters a father prostituting his underage daughter. The name of the costume shop is Rainbow Fashions. Rainbows, rainbow symbolism, and Wizard of Oz themes are all related to MK Ultra mind control.
Don't you want to go where the rainbow ends?
And lending credence to this theory is a conversation which allegedly occurred between Nicole Kidman and the acclaimed filmmaker Stanley Kubrick. Kidman claims Kubrick told her pedophiles are running the world, going on to say he told her how the world really works and who is in charge behind the scenes while filming the movie Eyes Wide Shut. If this is what Kubrick exposed in those 24 minutes, no wonder he ended up dead. However, Nicole was never as naive to this sordid world as she may have acted. Her father, Anthony Kidman, was a high-level Luciferian himself, a member of Aleister Crowley's notorious Ordo Templi Orientis, a group that engages in ritual sex magic and ancient pagan rites. He died mysteriously after an Australian named Fiona Barnett formally named him as one of her abusers.
Throughout my childhood, I was a victim of Australia's VIP child sex trafficking ring. For example, I was prostituted to pedophile parties at Parliament House, Canberra, and to an international leader at Fairbairn Military Airport. The people involved in this elite pedophile ring included high-ranking politicians, police, and judiciary.
Kidman's stardom makes a lot more sense once we know about her elite connections. And it should come as no surprise that Kubrick cast her in the film Eyes Wide Shut.
Look at what they're doing right now by dressing up women as men and men as women and teaching drag queen ideology to children. Look! Drag Story Hour at Whole Foods. Anybody hear that? Right? Jeff Bezos owns Whole Foods. Now, why is this guy? 1 million moms launches boycott of Whole Foods over Drag Queen Story Hour event. Did you see this? If I were to pull him aside and say, Jeff, are you into this drag queen? He'd say, no. Are you a drag queen? No. Have you had a penchant for drag queen? No. Jeff, did you really grow up thinking one of these days when I have the chance to own the Washington Post and Whole Foods, I want to spread drag queendom. I want kids to have their reality rocked by bringing in drag queens and not telling them that this is show and tell or this is whatever, but that this is normal. No, he would say that was not my idea. He would most probably say, and I'm just guessing, he probably would say, no, in order for me to be a billionaire, gazillionaire, the richest man on the planet, do you think I did this on my own? Jeff Bezos would say, sit down. Do you think that I am the only person who could have made Amazon? Do you? Do you think that other people have tried to do this, but it didn't get off the ground? They didn't have the help from the right people. Basically cornering the market on everything and basically destroying every mom and pop thing there. Do you think I, Jeff Bezos, now hear me out, it's a psychodrama, I'm Jeff Bezos, that I did this because of my genius, my hard work? Do you think that? Do you think that Bill Gates got to be Bill Gates because of his genius, because of his novel idea? You don't think the government, DARPA, Big Brother, whoever you want, whatever you want to call this, they gave me this? And me and Elon Musk, the biggest poser of them all, but he's got to be somebody. You got to pick somebody. So they picked these people. They picked Zuckerberg. He was the kid from the Harvard dorm who put together the social media thing called Facebook. We're going to pick you, DARPA. Hi, this is Zuckerberg. You're going to enjoy your billions. We run it. We're going to go into people's homes. We're going to use you as a vehicle. We don't care about the money. We own the world. We own money. We'll give you $1 trillion. Doesn't mean anything to us. We don't care about that. We want to also perpetuate this myth that conventional in this kind of a neo-feudal world, you don't have to work hard. Just come up with some wacky, crazy app, and you'll be same thing with everybody else. So somebody along the line must have said, I'm just guessing, listen, baby, you're going to do what we want. Absolutely. If we want to push vaccines, fine. If you want to have the first Amazon jet spraying solar radiation management, SRM, chemtrail spraying, stratospheric ionic, if we tell you to do that, you got it. Think that's going to happen one day? Amazon. Well, that's right. Thank you, Dave. We're Amazon. We're glad to be a part of the movement to diminish greenhouse effect by basically providing a barrier so that the sun, we're going to cool down the planet. We're going to cool down the planet by spraying all of this stuff every single day forever. We're going to blanket, because once we stop, it drifts to the bottom and you'll get your blue sky. That's what we're doing. We're doing the best that we can right now, and we're going to do it, and you're going to help us. Right, Jeff? Yeah, sure. He'll do it. Jeff, you want to have put microchips in your butt? Absolutely. Do I get to keep your money? Yeah. Oh, sure. I'll do it. Vaccines, sound waves, you name it. I'm Jeff Bezos. Do you think that guy made Amazon the way it is? Seriously, does anybody think that? Deep state, police state, intel state, shadow government, government within a government, globalists, they pick somebody and say, come here, you. They infiltrate everybody. Look at these people, Tavistock, the Beatles, infiltration of Hollywood. This has been going on. Once I sit together and I can tell people this, and we can go on and explain this to people, they will see that they'll say, oh, is that what you've been talking about? That's what we've been talking about. So this is what a conspiracy theory is? This is it. And this is the stuff that people were saying crazy? Yes. Doesn't sound that crazy to me. Me neither.
A lot of parents knew that this is the wave of the future. This is where society is heading.
How do we expect to raise wonderful, nurturing fathers if we don't encourage nurturing play when they're boys?
So I believe that the implementation of robotics is now going to accelerate very quickly.
Yes.
And the number one challenge of robotics is how do you create legal and financial and accounting systems to manage it? You're talking about new systems for every county, every state, every country, globally. I mean, from a legal and financial standpoint, it's a huge challenge to do it.
Right.
Now, the way to simplify it enormously is to just take the human system and slip the robots into the human system. And the beauty of that is you have a state and local and payroll taxation system that the deep state is financially dependent on. They don't want to lose that, okay? So if you can set it up so that a robot can be a citizen and a robot can have a birth certificate, you can slip it right through the payroll system. And this will save you decades of controversy, nightmare work. It's very brilliant in a Machiavellian way. And what you need, though, is you need one for a robot to be a citizen, which we see Saudi Arabia moving to establish. And then you need, on the certificate process, the possibility of a gender X.
Right.
And what do we see? We see states, and now New York City, moving to create a third gender option on birth certificates and driver's licenses, gender X.
Right.
Now, everybody presumes that this is all some LGBT, let's make the transgender group happy.
No.
It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with the deep state finding a way to implement robotics very quickly that doesn't hiccup their cash flows.
That's right.
And there you have it.
That's it. The fundamental tactic here is defining reality through the manipulations of language. This is what's behind corporate personhood, and this is what they're doing here all over again. It's just, to me, it's obvious. I mean, it just, come on. They've done this before, folks.
Well, except for this, someone in the second or third quarter wrote a marvelous article that documents the financing of the transgender movement and shows you that there is no transgender movement. There's just a lot of money from a relatively small number of places.
Yep.
And once this is all over, now they don't mention they're using entrainment, but I think they're using entrainment too. You know, they're destroying a lot of, you have all these young people who are being entrained into, you know, going through surgery, taking hormones, doing all these things that can really harm their body. And then when it's all over, they're going to wake up and they're not going to know what happened to them. Yeah, it's pretty ugly.
So I feel like my makeup isn't looking great today.
Would you have willingly incarnated into a realm where a mobbed-up megalomaniac like Donald Trump could become leader of the most powerful military nation ever known?
Here lies Fat Tony Salerno. He was the boss of the Genovese crime family, and it just so happens the man from whom Donald Trump bought his concrete. Fat Tony and other mobsters had a lock on New York concrete. While most builders use steel and some concrete, Trump built the tallest concrete building in New York.
Fat Tony Salerno was fat, and he was the head of the Genovese crime family, which was the most powerful crime family in the city at the time.
And Fat Tony didn't just supply concrete to Donald Trump. The two men also shared a lawyer, Roy Cohn.
Well, the evidence is that Fat Tony Salerno met with Donald Trump in Roy Cohn's office, which makes incredibly logical sense. Not only did I have sources telling me that at the time, but when you consider that he's building the largest concrete structure of its time, and the concrete industry is controlled by Fat Tony Salerno, it makes all the sense in the world.
Super builder Donald Trump has said, if you need somebody to get vicious, hire Roy Cohn. And this mafia boss man did just that. Tony Salerno, recently indicted, has long been one of Roy Cohn's clients.
Tony, you've read the indictment, you've read the charges in this indictment. Did you do any of those things anymore?
I don't get tough with anyone, Mr. Giddys. My lawyer does.
Our other top story tonight, the man who inspired Donald Trump and why critics say this man's disgusting amorality continues to infect American politics today. My special guest for this report, an Emmy Award-winning writer making his first appearance on The Beat, New York Magazine's Frank Rich. His latest cover story in New York Magazine profiles the endurance of Roy Cohn, who literally led the Red Scare McCarthy hearings as chief counsel for Senator Joe McCarthy, and worked at the intersection of the mafia, New York nightlife, and a wide cast of highly questionable characters. Cohn was a lawyer accused of basically working the wrong side of the law. Rich writes about his indictments and scandals, including accusations of bank and securities law violations, perennial tax evasion, bribery, extortion, theft. Cohn was charged and acquitted of 5 different crimes. He was ultimately disbarred for misconduct. He's considered both infamous and something of a legend, a character in Angels in America, and anyone familiar with New York's underworld can detect a hint of Cohn in the question that arises in so many crime stories: do criminals want a lawyer to defend them or to help them be criminals?
Seriously, when the going gets tough, you don't want a criminal lawyer, all right? You want a criminal lawyer. Know what I'm saying?
Consider that as the context for a 26-year-old Donald Trump who linked up with Cohn and chose him as the lawyer and enforcer in New York. Cohn is dead. But Frank Rich argues his scurrilous mindset is alive, and the Trump era is testing our ability to combat gutter fighters, especially when it feels like maybe their approach is successful.
Roy Cohn's life shines a light on the darkest parts of the American psyche.
He's this bridge between legitimate and illegitimate.
He was like a caged animal.
Don't settle, don't apologize, attack.
Rich quotes Cohn's imagined dialogue in the play Angels in America, where he says, was it legal?
Was it legal? Fuck legal. Am I a nice man? Fuck nice.
They say terrible things about me in the nation. Fuck the nation! You want to be nice or you want to be effective?
Frank Rich joins me now. An honor to have you at the table.
Thanks for having me.
If the Cohn-Trump playbook is effective, does that mean more people mimic it, and how should society deal with that?
Well, it can be effective, and one thing to remember about Cohn was he wasn't even much of a lawyer. He was a bomb thrower. He was someone who would, stall, do all countersuits and everything to keep justice from happening and law from taking its course. The way we may have to stop it really takes place largely in this city, because one of the points of my piece is that Roy Cohn and Donald Trump were nurtured by a New York establishment, including people in the media, liberals, Democrats, as well as Republicans and conservatives, who like this kind of fixer, who like someone who can get them Yankee tickets or get the right concrete company to build a skyscraper or fix something at City Hall, a tax abatement for a real estate development. And one of the interesting things about both these guys is that they were helped by places like the New York Times, 60 Minutes in the case of Roy Cohn, and all sorts of public officials, regardless of political party.
That's such an important thread in your piece, that there is plenty of evil around, but the evil that thrives usually does so with a lot of accommodation.
When you look at Cohn's life, you're shining a light on demagoguery, hypocrisy, and the darkest parts of the American psyche.
Roy Cohn's contempt for people, his contempt for the law, was so evident on his face that you knew you were in the presence of evil.
And the point I keep making is this is the ruling class, which is the Clintons and the Trumps and the royal family and all of that. So I know you're saying Roy Cohn, I don't know what you'd call him, confidant or advisor.
Well, mentor, and that's that's straight from the horse's mouth, really. Roy Cohn and Donald Trump were super close. Roy Cohn was also a mentor to Roger Stone, who a lot of people will know for his dirty tricks going back to the Nixon administration and all the way up to the Trump administration today.
I'm an agent provocateur.
Political strategist.
Controversial as you can get.
An incredible capacity for treachery.
Win at all cost mentality.
When people think of Washington corruption, they think of Roger Stone.
Those who say I have no soul, those who say I have no principles, are losers. Those are bitter losers. I revel in your hatred, because if I weren't effective, you wouldn't hate me.
So why is this significant? So in the beginning of the 1950s, there was a sexual blackmail ring involving boys that involved Louis Rosenstiel. And he really got his start during Prohibition and was a well-known mob-linked businessman, specifically linked to people like Mayor Lansky. He had all these ties to intelligence, both in the U.S. and Israel. And Rosenstiel was the owner of Schenley Liquors, and he had a very cozy relationship with J. Edgar Hoover. Actually, J. Edgar Hoover's, one of his longtime aides, Louis Nichols, was given the #2 post, plus lots of lucrative stock options at Rosenstiel's company. And Rosenstiel was originally running a sort of a mob-linked sexual blackmail operation out of his house. And this was later expanded, and Roy Cohn, who was general counsel to McCarthy during this time, eventually took it over and began to run it out of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan in a suite that became rather infamous, but in hushed tones. That was Suite 233. And it was later revealed by court documents from divorce filings of Louis Rosenstiel's ex-wife. It comes up on the early 1970s crime investigation into organized crime. And also, according to former NYPD detective, I think the head of the Vice Division, Jim Rothstein, Roy Cohn admitted to James Rothstein's face that he was doing this and that he quote unquote ran the little boys, and that this began as part of the anti-communist crusade of the time as a way for this faction, this political faction that Roy Cohn was a part of, to gain and maintain political control.
What the fuck do you think this is? Sunday school?
No, Roy, but this is gastric juices churning. This is enzymes and acids. This is intestinal is what this is. Bowel movement and blood red meat. This stinks. This is politics, Joe. This is the game of being alive. And you think you're what? You think you're above that?
above alive is what? Dead in the clouds. You're on Earth, goddammit. Plant a foot, stay a while.
So Roy Cohn eventually took this over. And they were doing it also with J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, or at least he was present there. Hoover was at a lot of the stuff.
Hoover's friend Louis Rosenstiel allegedly invited his wife Susan to witness an orgy. She told Hoover biographer Anthony Summers what happened next.
They wound up going to a suite at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. And amongst the people present was a man dressed up as a woman in a fluffy dress with flounces and lace stockings and high heels, whom she recognized as J. Edgar Hoover. And that evening, 2 young boys in their late teens were brought in and had a form of sex game with the director of the FBI dressed up in drag.
The photograph I saw him in drag, standing in the room with a wig on and a frilly black dress, if I remember right, and fishnet stockings and high heels. And there was absolutely no mistake that it was our beloved Mr. Hoover.
And Hoover, if you look at his history, was well known for trying to get as much blackmail on as many people as possible, whether he loved them or he hated them.
We refer to the Cold War era as the McCarthy era. I think that more properly we could refer to it not as McCarthyism, but Hooverism.
As I point out in part 2 of my series, Roy Cohn was extremely connected to pretty much almost every mainstream outlet of the period. His childhood friends, for example, one of them was the publisher of the National Enquirer.
If anyone was ever born to run a newspaper, it was Gene Pope.
Gene's genius was knowing what the public wanted celebrity-wise.
So I'm going to call the National Enquirer and the people who wrote this liars.
I mean, we were the first ones out there with the helicopter.
If you were a famous movie star, we might have your brother on our payroll.
That's why the Enquirer got them first.
The joke used to be, we need tiny, tiny cameras and big balls.
Pure trash. Pure trash? Pure trash. It's an insult to people's intelligence.
We have our blood man and we have our brains man. He thought Gore would sell papers, and he was right. In 1975, the average circulation was 5,700,000 copies.
There are allegations that mafia money has been behind the Enquirer since the beginning.
Right. I've read that.
The National Enquirer changed American journalism in ways that American journalism either is unaware of or refuses to admit.
The other one was the owner of Condé Nast magazines, which includes The New Yorker, GQ, Esquire, Vanity Fair, a bunch of other magazines. He was also very close with William Buckley, a very prominent conservative journalist, William Safire, who worked for the New York Times. One of his closest friends was Barbara Walters. I mean, and he was also close friends with Rupert Murdoch. It was Roy Cohn that got Rupert Murdoch connected to the Reagan White House. So he was definitely super tied into the press and able to weaponize that, not just to protect his own operations, but to use it to threaten other people if blackmail didn't work. And he was also able to kill stories just by calling the media moguls that he was close to. A lot of people will say, too, that the people in Hollywood that are involved with the sick stuff, they just fund Democrats. Actually, Lew Wasserman, the longtime owner of Universal MCA, he backed Ronald Reagan. He bankrolled Ronald Reagan, not just his political career, his film career. And he was directly connected to the mob. Lew Wasserman used to work for Mo Dalitz, who is, the main mob figure in Ohio, one of Mayor Lansky's closest associates. So it all goes back to the same organized crime syndicate that made close ties to intelligence agencies in the U.S. and also in Israel. And we see these 3 elements, organized crime, U.S. intelligence, and Israeli intelligence working together in things like Iran-Contra. After this alliance was made, we see them with Iran-Contra. We see them with the Epstein thing. We see all these these same 3 elements, factions of them anyway, coming together to basically create what for them is a business. It's a criminal enterprise. It's really an extension of the businesses that the mob had in the 1930s. As intelligence agencies are involved, that's, gives them state-sponsored protection. And it also gives them a free flow of money from taxpayers to use for this stuff. So what better racket is there than that? Actually, when Mayor Lansky was on his deathbed, he said that he learned way too late that it was much easier to cheat people legally by using the government than it was to do so by being a criminal. That tells you a lot.
Yeah. The mob guys learned, why are we doing all this criminal stuff when we can just have the government co-sign it? They're like, we can get away with whatever we want. And Epstein was either murdered or the CIA extracted him. I mean,
right.
And no one's questioning that. And Chris Cuomo's telling me to not ask that question.
Don't get buried in legalese. Don't follow the finger pointing. And please don't get caught up in the intrigue of who was better friends with this guy. Who cares?
So then the Roy Cohn, the parties then in the 80s is where we started to hear Trump's name come up with these.
Is Trump involved? Well, I mean, it's obvious he hung out with Epstein a few times, so yeah, he is involved. Everyone's involved, guys. Everyone. Maybe, what about, oh, the Clintons are big time into it.
Right. So Roy Cohn dies in 1986, and he had gotten really ill by like 1985, so presumably he wasn't running that much of this anymore at that point, and someone else may have taken it over.
To me, the nicest thing, let's be affirmative, the nicest thing that I have ever heard about Joe McCarthy was told me by Senator Flanders of Vermont that he was a full-time homosexual. Is this true?
No, I'm sure you'd think that merited a badge of honor, but it is not true.
Well, I'm getting to you in a minute, but
well,
sure. What about Senator McCarthy?
Sure, I mean, that's your favorite topic of conversation, I know that.
I know, it's
by the way,
aroused by the obvious.
I know.
You know, of course, why people ask about AIDS in Roy Cohn.
Sure.
Because they believe that you're a homosexual, and that you simply have never acknowledged the fact. And a good friend of mine, and a good friend of yours, I should say.
Tell him if he wants to admit anything, he can, but it's a lie as far as
No, a good friend of mine who is a woman says that she believes that Roy Cohn wants to, in effect, come out of the closet.
I ain't dying from nothing, to start with, number one. Right. Number two, you asked me categorically, and I tell you categorically, I do not have AIDS.
Since 1950, there have been rumors he was gay, rumors he denied constantly.
Why don't you answer? I'm going to. So the answer is no.
Cohn staunchly denied he was suffering from AIDS. He insisted, liver cancer, and was receiving treatment at the National Institutes of Health. When Cohn died in August, NIH said the immediate cause of death was cardiopulmonary arrest, with complications stemming from AIDS. Bert Jones, CNN reporter.
Not long after he died, Donald Trump bought the same hotel, and according to people that attended these parties, some disturbing things went on there, and there was allegedly, from the people that were there, right, a lot of drugs, a lot of young women that had been promised, that they could advance their careers by associating with these old, wealthy guys.
A lot of things about me you don't know anything about, Daddy. Things you wouldn't understand. Things you couldn't understand. Things you shouldn't understand.
And one guy, when he was asked by a reporter how old were the women there, because he had said young women and girls, his first reaction was to say 14, and then he backed up and said, I don't know, 24, I don't know, and got all weird. So there's been speculation from, not just from him, from that report, but from others, that there may have been sort of a don't ask, don't tell policy of bringing underage girls. So it's kind of disturbing. What went on even after Trump purchased the hotel, and the fact that Trump considered Roy Cohn his mentor when, Roy Cohn was involved with all this stuff. And, something that happened with Jeffrey Epstein, right, is that if you looked at the reporting before he was arrested and what people would say about him, including Donald Trump, they would say stuff like, oh, he liked women on the younger side. A lot of people that were around Jeffrey Epstein noticed that he was often accompanied by these, these girls, who were clearly underage. So the same thing actually happened with Roy Cohn. Roger Stone, in I think it was The New Yorker, said, yeah, Roy Cohn was always surrounded by these young blonde boys, but we just never talked about it.
It's so crazy. And they're gonna, even when they do release stories about Maxwell or whatever, the way they cover Maxwell, they just cover it like some celebrity gossip shit. It's unreal.
Well, that's what they're trying to make it. They're trying to, delegitimize the severity of her crimes. Yeah. You know what I mean? And just make it into like, this is the sad ex-girlfriend of this guy that died. Not being like, serial sex trafficker of children whose father worked for the Mossad. They don't bring up any of that stuff. It's really crazy because it's all, public record.
So as we wrap up here, where are you going to keep going? What direction are you taking this investigation?
Well, I have a couple spin-offs planned. The main one I'm probably going to start working on first has to do with the other service I think that Epstein was offering to intelligence communities, now that we know he was linked to intelligence, right? So obviously one of those was the sexual blackmail operation, sexual trafficking thing, but he didn't get involved in that until the 1990s. As I mentioned earlier, he was involved in the shady financial stuff for intelligence assets and operatives in the 1980s. And it's really clear that he continued in that type of behavior up until his arrest. And actually, it was just a month before his arrest that Deutsche Bank closed all their accounts with him. So I really think the real reason that Epstein was arrested at this time has to do with the fact that these financial services, quote unquote, that he was offering for intelligence agencies, they didn't need him anymore, or he screwed up there and something happens. It's worth pointing out, too, that when this network, I guess you could say, wanted to sort of steal money out of a U.S. government agency, which, the CIA is allowed to do because of the CIA Act of 1949, you sort of have to launder it through either a foundation or some sort of charitable organization. But that actually changed last October, not long before this Miami Herald expose came out, which is the official explanation for Epstein's charges against Epstein being prepared. Actually, just a few weeks before that article came out, there was a change in U.S. budget policy across the government, where this is so insane. The government can have a public financial record that it releases publicly, right? That's why public. That's a lie, and then it has a private one that's real, and no one sees it. So basically, they can just launder money or steal money from any agency directly, and no one will ever know about it. Isn't that insane? So I think that shows that the service that Epstein was offering, they didn't need him anymore, and maybe he had become a liability after the Miami Herald story came out, and they didn't need him to keep doing those financial services he'd been doing for them for decades.
Wow.
In the early 90s, Trump was almost $1 billion in the red. By 2004, he'd recovered and got into reality TV.
You're fired.
Back in the 1990s, you owed something like $900 million. Your empire was pretty much
more than that.
You owed more than that?
975 was personally guaranteed. That was just the small part. That was the harder debt. But I owed many, many billions of dollars. And now my company is much bigger and stronger than it was in the 80s.
Who bailed out Donald Trump when he was $1 billion upside down in the early 90s? Who dared loan him money when he was that deep in the red?
Was it Deutsche Bank, BCCI, Russian oligarchs, the CIA, Mossad organized crime network?
Whoever it was, Trump has owed some major favors to those hidden benefactors, or blackmailers, ever since. Is that how we got FASB 56?
Mr. Trump ran up more than $1 billion in losses on businesses like his Taj Mahal casino and a failed airline. And that's not all. According to the Times, in multiple years, Mr. Trump seems to have lost more money than nearly any other individual taxpayer in the country.
Bribery tends to work well on people who are poor, but the bribe has to be huge to influence someone who's already rich, or $1 billion in debt. That's where compromise tactics like blackmail come into play. Most multi-millionaires and billionaires would just laugh off a $50,000 bribe. It wouldn't be worth the risk. But if they're threatened with blackmail, which could cause them to lose everything, they might be willing to play ball. The most sophisticated and well-financed blackmailers won't destroy you right away. They'll keep you in the game and even promote you, as long as you do their bidding.
We tortured some folks.
In the overworld, at the rarefied heights of wealth and power, it is better to own someone than to out someone. Take Dennis Hastert, for instance, a high school wrestling coach known for sodomizing little boys. This flaming mediocrity somehow rose through the ranks of the US House of Representatives to become the longest-serving Republican Speaker of the House in history. Did blackmailers control him the entire way? We can be almost certain of it. The most effective form of sexual blackmail is paedophilia, and Hastert was an easy target for it. He eventually went to prison after being convicted of financial crimes related to covering up his tracks as a serial child molester. We're left to wonder how many middle-class hosing bills Hastert got passed into law to appease his overworld blackmailers before they finally decided he'd reached his expiration date and they tossed him in the trash. It's a sure bet that similar compromise tactics have turned the current Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell into someone else's puppet. And how could it be otherwise with a horny, mobbed-up megalomaniac like Donald Trump?
A pathocracy controls the American empire now, and we're all paying for it.
And the world is paying for it.
Everybody's taking everything dark. Corporations are going dark with their finances. Harvard went dark.
Right.
Germany just announced that it's going to do the same thing. Everybody's doing it.
Well, when the mother lode, because the U.S. federal credit is the 800-pound gorilla, if they go dark, they're dramatically lowering their transaction costs.
Right.
They promulgated draft FASB 56 policy. What this is, there's a group called the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board that came out, in fact, of the legislative work that I and other people had done in the early Bush administration. It's a board of private accountants who are supposed to advise on different policies. And it's the corollary of a board that does things on accounting in the private sector. So this was supposed to be the complementary public sector one. Anyway, so they come out with a draft proposal that basically says, by a secret process, a secret group of people can take portions of the book dark without informing anyone.
Right.
Now, what that means is when you get the financial statements, they're totally meaningless.
Right,
Because, in fact, I think it's a total of, it's all the agencies plus another 150 entities can just take something dark, and you can't even know that they did it, so you have no idea what you're looking at. It makes the total federal government meaningless.
We mean no ill will.
It was adopted, believe it or not, on the week that everybody was watching Brett Kavanaugh.
That is a farce.
Now, to adopt this policy, you need the General Accounting Office, now called the General Accountability Office, and you need the Office of Management and Budget.
Right.
Okay? So we're talking about bipartisan leadership in the Senate and the House, both Republican and Democrat, and the White House. Now, the Kavanaugh hearings would have persuaded you that they were having a serious war.
Yes, we drank beer.
In fact, they weren't.
Liked beer.
They were
Still
agreeing to the greatest single increase in the swamp's power since the 47 and 49 Act. Because basically what this said is the deep state can spend as much as they want, whenever they want, on whatever they want, and you can't even know that they're doing it or that they're making it secret that they're doing it.
We drank beer. We liked beer.
So what this means is you can take all the money that you're getting by selling treasuries and you can spend it on whatever you want. You want weather warfare in the heartland? No problem. You've got the money. You want to burn down half of California? No problem. You've got the money. You want to pay the Saudis or the Israelis to blow up oil tankers? No problem. You've got the money. In fact, you've got enough money so that all the mercenary armies you've created and financed over the last 30 years can just bring in proposals and say, boy, do we have a deal for you. It'll make the U.S. stock market go up. And you can just say, that's great. You can write a check. You know, so if you have to launder money through the Clinton Foundation and Epstein and all those kinds of operations, those are very expensive, very time-consuming, etc. If you're a nation state and the U.S. can just do whatever they want, whenever they want, privately under complete secrecy, you can't afford to take the time to do those.
Well, yeah, you said last night that FASB was the death warrant for Jeffrey Epstein.
Right.
And if you look at it, if you look at the whole Epstein thing and connect all the dots there, I think you're absolutely right. What they're doing is they're rolling up these networks that they no longer need because, number one, they're high risk.
Is it true, sir, that you have what's been described as an egg-shaped penis?
You've got people like Epstein that are essentially narcissists that are ego-driven, and that introduces risk into your operation. You've got high overhead. That's the other thing. You know, you're actually having to run people and pay people and buy them off and blackmail and all of that. And I think what's crucial here is something that has been brought out by various researchers, and that is that Epstein's connections with the Maxwells, particularly the two sisters, that were involved since, I think, the late 1980s with developing information technologies.
Here are the twin Maxwell sisters, and they're a very important piece of this puzzle. They're a very important tentacle of the Epstein case. Although it's more accurately, I suppose, described at this point as the Maxwell case, because Jeffrey Epstein is dead. That being the case, I think we should focus on the living for the sex trafficking operation that Jeffrey Epstein is accused of running. The blame for that now should shift to Ghislaine Maxwell. She has been accused of being the procurer and groomer of the underage girls for Jeffrey Epstein's operation. And while we're talking about it, what was that operation really? Now, aside from servicing the needs of rapists and perverts, it was also a compromise factory, a blackmail and extortion factory when you look at it. They made sure to go after very rich, powerful, connected people, and then, of course, they could get those people to do whatever they wanted if those people were caught in compromising situations with Epstein, Maxwell, or any of the girls, right? The whole Maxwell family, I think, is in on this game. Their whole raison d'etre is information. After all, let's not forget, let's look for a second at the father, the patriarch of the Maxwell family, Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, a.k.a. Robert Jones, a.k.a. Robert du Maurier, a.k.a. Abraham Lashby, a.k.a. Jan Ludwig Hock. He's been accused, credibly, of being involved with the KGB. We know he was British military intelligence, and it's possible that he was in MI6. He's also been accused of being Mossad by Seymour Hersh and many other people. People also are saying that Jeffrey Epstein could have been a Mossad agent as well. So, given that we know for a fact Robert Maxwell was involved in a lot of shady dealings with spy agencies, and his daughter Ghislaine was involved with Jeffrey Epstein, who appears to have been running a blackmail operation. What can we make of his two daughters, Christine and Isabel, when we find out that software that they have created is installed in almost all of the important companies and many government agencies, especially in the US? Killiad Inc. designed the FBI's new databases. The owner and co-founder of Killiad Inc. is Christine Maxwell. Now we've got information on demand at the Library of Congress and Killiad at the FBI. I don't know if there's anything wrong with it. All I'm saying is she comes from a spy family, and software is notorious for having backdoors built into it so that you can infiltrate the data. And once you've infiltrated the data, think of the power that you can have. But there's more. Here's a quick look at all the companies and organizations, not all of them, but a lot of them, the ones that their software is now working with.
It's a Promise Software story. Maxwell was the big distributor on Promise Software.
Yes, right, exactly. We're looking, I think, at Promise, version 4.0.
Right.
So they've perfected the means of inventory control, quite bluntly, and I hate to use those words, but if you're running...
That's exactly it.
That's exactly what they've done, and you warned about this, I think, a couple of years ago when we were talking about slavery in one of the quarterly reports, that the problem was perfecting the capital. In other words, keeping your inventory, so to speak, on the plantation. Well, if you've got RFD chips implanted in people and you've got a software package that can track people through several different databases, like Promise could, you don't need the Epsteins anymore. You don't need these networks of the Clintons and so on and so forth. You've now basically turned over this whole slavery pedophilia network to the technocrats.
Right.
So, you know, it's time to roll it up, and I think that's exactly what they're doing. They're rolling up all of these analog components.
Right, so
networks.
when I said a couple of years ago the financial coup is over, now they're going to consolidate and re-engineer. And all these players who think they're important...
Yeah, they're getting swept aside.
I wrote a piece, sort of my magnus opus on the solution to everything. And one of the things I said was, don't worry about whether aliens are running things. What you need to understand is whoever is running things are alien to us.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter whether, as a species, they're human or not.
And it comes down again to this pathology of people of complete impunity who treat the people as their fodder to go to war, to have pleasure with, to do their jobs for them, to fire them when they don't need them anymore. Just total contempt for the public because they think that they are different somehow, that they are indeed another species, and that we're just we're subspecies, and they are in control.
This is a thing that's been going on since like the days of J.D. Rockefeller, and we even see it with all these people in the Epstein case. Even Epstein, before he was exposed and arrested the first time, Bill Clinton referred to him as a great philanthropist. So all of these guys that are, these oligarchs that are funding all of this stuff in this, Orwellian dystopian world, they have rebranded themselves as philanthropists. I think it's really important to peck away at that as much as possible and just show, how absurd that is. I mean, yeah, they may give their money away to a lot of causes, but what other horrible things are they funding that more than totally canceled it out? You know what I mean? It's a way of improving their brand. So this thing that the Wexners and the Bronfmans and Michael Steinhardt and all these guys were involved in the mega group that has a lot of ties to Epstein and stuff like that. They claim to be a philanthropy group, but, pretty much everyone that is named as a member of the mega group has direct ties to organized crime, every single one of them. And even Sam Bronfman, who's the patriarch of the Bronfman family with Seagrams and all of that, and was known to be this mob-linked guy and was known for his mob ties, he went about to rebrand himself as a philanthropist, specifically focused on pro-Israel causes or Zionist causes and things like that in the 1930s. That was his plan specifically, and the mega group is an outgrowth of that. But we see that not just with the mega group, but, we see that with all of these guys that are essentially funding the same stuff, which is, this push towards global government, but they're claiming to do it by being philanthropists. Oh, we're here to help you and all this stuff. It really needs to be exposed that no, they're not here to help you. They believe in supremacy, they believe in eugenics, and they believe in concentrating control, in their hands only, and, putting us in this feudal pre-crime surveillance state.
The times are changing as they should be, and it's a good time to start holding these monsters accountable.
They sound like a great big pussy, just waiting to get fucked. This country, you gotta make the money first. Then when you get the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, then you get money. I want you to see what a good boy I think is $1,000. That kind of money you can buy the Supreme Court. Me, I want what's coming to me. The world should go. And everything in it.
Tens of trillions of dollars are being extracted from the United States of America. Democrats aren't doing it. Republicans are not doing it. An entire integrated system, financial system, trading system, taxing system that was created by both parties over a period of 2 decades is at work on our entire country right now. And we're sitting here arguing about whether we should do the $4 trillion plan that kicks the can down the road for the president for 2017 or burn the place to the ground, both of which rich are reckless, irresponsible, and stupid. There's a refusal on both the Democratic and the Republican side of the aisle to acknowledge the mathematical problem, which is that the United States of America is being extracted. It's being extracted through banking, it's being extracted through trade, and it's being extracted through taxation. And there's not a single politician that has stepped forward to deal with this. People of the United States of America, your Congress is bought. Your Congress is incapable of making legislation on health care, banking, trade, or taxes, because if they do it, they will lose their political funding, and they won't do it. And until we get rid of the bought Congress, which is Jimmy Williams' constant point, which is get the money out of politics, and until a president says that's the problem and says he's going to fix it, there is no policy that I can possibly see, no matter how brilliant your idea may be, or your idea, or my idea, or her idea, or your idea at home. That idea will not happen as long as there's the capacity to basically fire a politician who disagrees with me by taking funding away from him. Is that a fair assessment?
Money in politics is the root of all political evil. It is corruption at its worst. And until we step up and kick that out of the park, it's going to be the same system all
and only the president could do that.
America, America, Lord knows I love this land. America, America, and I love living in Manhattan. CIA, Al-Qaeda, FBI, Iran, NBC, nothing, JF came and went, 'cause he stood up for something, who remembers just once. We all know what happened, but at least he stood up. That's when they tried to take over, but he didn't die in vain. Since he stood up, we know some of their names. There was the Pay of Pigs fiasco that spoiled the relations, with the chain of command disappearing up the line. They insisted upon his complete cooperation, and he respectfully declined. And Operation Zapata was the code name for the Bay of Pigs, like the Bush's oil company was a funny coincidence. And they painted two gunboats so it looked like a pleasure trip, and the Houston and the Barbara were the boats they sailed in on. That's when they tried to take over, changing the rules of the game. Thought they covered their tracks, but it's all in a name.
I watched the war on TV just like everybody else, okay? Thought the same damn things, you know, what you thought when you saw a picture of a young woman with her baby lying face down, dead in a ditch. 2 gooks. You had 3 reactions, Rich. Same as everybody else. The first one was real easy. I hate the United States of America. Yeah. You see the same damn thing the next day and you move up a notch. There is no God. Yeah. But you know what you finally say? What everybody finally says? No matter what? I'm hungry. I'm hungry, Rich. I'm fucking starved.
So you pick out somebody to blackmail him?
I didn't pick him out, you did. And he isn't somebody. He's responsible.
For the girl?
For everything. Him and all the motherfuckers in the world just like him. They're all the same.
So let's blow up AT&T, huh?
You know why they're all the same, Rich? Because it's never their ass that's on the line. Never. It's always somebody else's. Always yours, mine, ours. So leave off the morality, okay?
Would you have willingly incarnated into
a realm where weaponized weather modification systems and evil, intelligent dust made of nanotechnology
serves the sociopathic whims of profiteering disaster capitalists?
Since time immemorial, since man walked from and lurched and slithered from the slime and the organic pool that is our real world, we have been trying to find ways to control the weather. Control the weather in terms of rain and drought for ourselves, for our crops, for our faith.
The weather makes possible all living things.
But there's also something which is never really talked about, and that is, we've always been interested as well, and that is the weaponization of weather, and why that's important. And through programs like HARP and others, and geoengineering and the like, and we are now seeing what appears to be absolute proof positive evidence, indicia, indications of that we are able to control and to change the course of weather, inclement weather. What worse form of catastrophic bomb is there than a typhoon, a tsunami, a hurricane, an earthquake? What if I can take, through concentrated Tesla waves, directed energy weapons, and by the way, I never mentioned fires and conflagration and the like, but what if I was able to target and focus specific Tesla-directed energy waves over tectonic plates, areas of extreme tectonic fragility, and if I could, via this direction, introduce, inspire, create, foment an earthquake, which gives rise to a tsunami. If I could take a Dorian and hold it off a coast, bring it in, move it back. What if somebody could later on say, I am going to send something inclement there, maybe to a natural enemy, maybe an enemy, but maybe some, let's just assume, let's be even more just economic. Let's think of Mr. Perkins and his particular way of economic hitman theories. What if I were to go out, wipe out a place, and go in and say immediately, I have loans for you, I have loans, I have the means by which I can help you rebuild your island, your community, your country, but you must take my loans, you must use my companies, and then when you're off, you're not able to pay me back, of course I can bribe individuals, but when you're not unable to pay us back, we then own your company. Let me just leave you with this. It is here. It's not going to be announced. It's not going to be said, hey, congratulations, guess what? We're actually changing weather. It's not going to happen. Nobody's going to say that. What I am saying to you is that the time is nigh and the time is here.
In an interview with the Los Angeles Times on April 21st, you said that you told the Associated Press that the American government has created weather tampering techniques so that the New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans and to control the rest. Would you explain what you were trying to say?
Well, what I was trying to say is exactly what I said. There is weather control techniques. We have a complete package on that, which I did not bring, but I certainly will see to it that it is brought in for the record. Number one, the entire patents on the equipment. Number two, Senator Claiborne Pell's complete statement and story of his own that not only does it exist, but that we even utilize it as far back as the Vietnam War. You might want to touch base with Senator Pell.
I just want to repeat before I turn to
question. Yes, but we do have all that information.
You're saying the government has created weather tampering techniques so that the, quote, New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans.
Worldwide.
Millions of Americans, and to control the rest.
Yes, sir, and that's my belief. As bizarre as that sounds, if somebody had told me that that equipment even existed 10 years ago, I would have thought they were nuts, sir. And at this point in time, we have all the documents to prove it. And if you think that 85 tornadoes takes place in the middle of our growing area by simultaneous accident, I'm sorry. With the equipment that's already set up internationally, and as bizarre as that is, it is proven and documented. We will supply you with those documents. As bizarre as that is, I would say that weather wars, and this is quoting actually Senator Claiborne Pell himself, that they are the greatest weapon ever created in the world, and that's the senator's own statement. So yes, I do stand on that.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Cole. Senator Feinstein.
Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com, where there's a return visit from one of the top geoengineering researchers in the world. He has the website geoengineeringwatch.org. I always say nobody puts up that much information and scientific data to lie to you. He is Dane Wigington. Dane, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. Lots to talk about.
There is, Greg, and it's increasing by the day. Many, thankfully, starting to wake up to what's unfolding in our skies.
Let's start with Dorian. That's the hurricane that has just decimated the Bahamas, and it just crawled over it and stalled over it. A lot of people on the alternative media sites are saying this is being controlled. This is weather control to the max. Is that true or is that false?
It's a historically verifiable fact. It's verifiable in the immediate term as well, as we have animations of radio frequency microwave transmissions directly interacting with, interfering with, and steering that storm as well as other storms. Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Maria. That data can be found at geoengineeringwatch.org. If a person just searches geoengineeringwatch.org Hurricane Harvey or Hurricane Maria, they can see real-time data that shows conclusive evidence that these storms are being manipulated.
At Weather Central, the control strategy is mapped out. A ridge of high pressure slants across the eastern United States between two low-pressure storm systems. If these two storm centers are intensified, the high will build up along the coast, forming a barrier that will turn the hurricane out to sea. With the touch of a button, the battle begins. On the ground, chemical cloud seeders begin to work the two storm areas. Robot planes seed the clouds from above. As an emergency measure, the controller calls for a salvo of vapor rockets to be fired ahead of the path the hurricane is predicted to take. These artificial clouds will block the sun from evaporating more water to feed the hurricane. The reports coming into the control center indicate that the diversionary cloud seeding over Kansas is now creating a flood danger. Specially equipped robot aircraft are dispatched immediately to release a high concentration of cloud seeding material into the fringes of the storm. Heavier seeding from the ground also helps to subdue the rain by spreading it over a wider area. The hurricane has stopped moving toward the coast, but is still intensifying. It must be made to move northward and out to sea. This is a crisis.
Aberdeen Station. Activate multiple seeding rockets on course 117.
The controller decides to fire cloud seeding rockets just ahead of the hurricane, hoping to start it moving. Slowly, the hurricane begins to shift. All available forces have been brought into play. Now we can only watch and wait. attention, the turning point is reached. Latest reports indicate the control strategy is successful. At last, the high-pressure ridge has settled along the coast, forming an invisible wall of safety.
The U.S. military started their hurricane manipulation operations 72 years ago in 1947. We have 7+ decades of this going on, and we have this going back as far back as 1962. Lyndon Johnson, then Vice President, later President, stating on the record that the military had the power to control the world's cloud cover even then.
The development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
The notion that this is not going on right now is just simply a deception, to say the least.
What were they angling to do? Stop it from hitting southern Florida at the expense of the Bahamas? It just stayed over there. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's just almost unprecedented. Weren't you telling me in the pre-interview that some of the weather forecasters are saying, we've never seen this before?
Many are saying that.
Talk
in
about
fact, a prominent CNN meteorologist has stated on the record as of this morning that he's never seen this type of hurricane behavior before.
This is incredibly powerful. This is not just barely a Category 5. This tops the Category 5 threshold by leaps and bounds. This is the strongest storm to ever hit the Bahamas. It has made that first landfall, the Abaco Islands, which is part of the Bahamas, and it is moving at a snail's pace. You can pretty much walk fast or jog faster than this storm is going, and it's going to sit over the Bahamas for a good 36 hours at least before making that northward turn. And so when you think about that, 185 mile per hour winds, gusts higher than 200 for a 36-hour duration, that is unprecedented.
So we can speculate on the agendas. Perhaps the U.S. military wants a foothold on the Bahamas, and wiping the island clean is certainly a step in that direction for them to occupy under humanitarian pretext and then stay. We can again speculate on the agendas, but the fact that that storm is being manipulated and stalled is absolute, indisputable fact. And we have facilities like HAARP. Many of your listeners have heard that term. They don't know what it is. It's an ionosphere heater, ground-based radio frequency microwave transmitter that can heat upper levels of the atmosphere and create high-pressure domes. What do we have steering Dorian? 2 high-pressure domes, high-pressure systems, one on the west side of Florida and one on the east side of the storm. And the clockwise rotation, like gears, with the Hurricane Dorian in the center, has kept that storm stationary in that place. And that is a signature of ionosphere heaters, Greg. So the bottom line is this technology exists. We have the stated goal of the U.S. military to control this type of weather phenomenon. And we can speculate as to the agenda, but the fact that these storms, and Dorian included, are being manipulated, that's beyond dispute.
Agenda 21 was agreed at the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil, which was headed by this guy, Maurice Strong, one of the gang big time, a mate of Al Gore. And he said, Maurice Strong, this billionaire oil man, etc., he said, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? What they are trying to do and planning to do is use saving the environment, which these buggers are destroying. How dare you? To justify deindustrialization and the end of democracy. Anyway, this is the wish list in documents for Agenda 21 operating through the United Nations. An end to national sovereignty, all justified by saving the world, by the way. State planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans and fresh water. Agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and ensuring equity equals slavery. The state is to define the role of business and financial resources. Abolition of private property is not sustainable, they say. Here we go again. How many times has this come up? Restructuring the family unit, children to be raised by the state. This is what Aldous Huxley said in Brave New World. People told what their job will be. Major restrictions on movement, creation of human settlement zones, I'll get to them in a minute. Mass resettlement as people are forced to vacate land where they live for reasons I'm coming to. dumbing down education achieved a long time ago, mass global depopulation in pursuit of all of the above.
People were upset. They thought, why is a gay Hollywood liberal sitting next to a conservative Republican president? Didn't even notice I'm holding the brand new iPhone 11.
You know, they were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Lasers, really? To change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo-jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now.
So what does it mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops, and if they don't have them, there's the consequences of famine?
Well, the bad news is if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all, because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
Incredibly interesting. Professor Michio Kaku, thank you so much.
November 8th, 2018, fire that swept through from the east to north, burned through Paradise in this greatest disaster in California history. But let's get into the anomalies and why we have to cultivate our common sense. Number 4, the massive fire ignition detonation bomb. Now take a look at the plume that excited out at that morning of. Big blast, and there's Lake Tahoe down below, which is 22 miles long, and you can see by the shadow of the plume out of Paradise, it had to be 15 to 20 miles tall going straight up. And then we have that confirmed on the radar frequencies there out of the Chico airport, that there was some type of ignition, an event that could have been directed energy. And then we have the book by John Milton, The Lost Paradise, the John Milton Prophecies, Paradise Lost. John Milton died on November 8th, and it's all about the Adam and Eve prophecy, about biting from the apple, about victory over God, about the taking of Lucifer, and Lucifer will come, and all the numerology of Adam and Eve and the fall from paradise as well. Could this have been predicted for so long that this is the takeover of paradise by the elite who are now claiming the butte there as their own? They're calling this a forest fire. There are 2 pictures that are primary that shows this is absolute and utter bullshit. This is paradise, folks. This is what they're saying was a forest fire, now revising to a fire ignition. It's total bullshit. We got to hold them to the fire, literally, about this. Then the evidences of directed energy weapons being used. This is a hillside going up to Concal on the side. You can see the laser cuts with the car torched in the middle, and you can see the laser cuts on the hill. Someone suggested they were practicing before they came into Paradise, which who knows. But we also have first-person photographs. This is the Kmart with the burning tree in the background. We also have first-person evidence saying that there was blue light flashes. In fact, the blue light flashes were so bright they blinded them. They could not look at it. Here you see blue on the top and not below. Number 10, nanobot self-replicating embers. Now take a look at this here, and what you're seeing is this is the body cam of a sheriff that they released.
But these are the embers that are in the grounds that are coming up that a gentleman I had on the show, Angel, was talking about, who worked on some of these projects and was familiar with them, that these were nanobot, self-replicating nanobot embers that could go and self-organize. Look at them organize here, folks. And look at how they come together and they go right around the people. Now, they're not burning the people, but they're saying they're going into the homes now and torching the homes down to the iron, down to the porcelain, down to the granite. So these embers are strong enough to go and get up to 3,000 degrees and towards the inside of homes, yet it's not strong enough to burn the people sitting right there, or the trees next to it, or the Freemason building, or anything they didn't want to have happen to it. Here's more prima facie evidence, but you can see the possibilities that these embers are intelligent life. They are nanobots and nanoparticulates.
I didn't know how they could get people off the lands. I didn't know how they could get people to agree to this anti-human strategy, right? It wasn't going to work, in my view. This UN Agenda 2030 strategy is completely anti-human. It's completely against private property. It's against our sovereign rights as human beings. So how would they get people to go for it? How would they get people to acquiesce their rights to this anti-human strategy? I never accounted for these fires.
State of emergency, one of the worst wildfires in California history.
The crews are actively engaged and in a pretty intense firefight.
Nearly 200,000 people evacuated, homes and wineries burned to the ground.
The fire has jumped to containment lines.
2.5 million people plunged into darkness tonight as the power is pulled deliberately.
Well, we get into the area of speculation here, but I think if you take the preponderance of the evidence, we are being attacked. This is actually a plan being carried out, and when we say that these fires are contrived, we mean that the arsonists are these same people that want us off the lands in the name of UN Agenda 2030. Am I overstating it, or is that exactly what's going on here?
No,
the real arsonists are these New World Order globalists that are now implementing UN Agenda 2030 strategies in California. They're not going to replace our current forms of energy, folks. The plan is not to lift the third world up to first world living standards. It's to drag the first world down to third world living standards. Thereby, we're all equal. That's equality. The new equality on planet Earth under UN Agenda 2030 is you're all serfs, you're all poor, then everyone's equal.
I'm not denying anthropogenic global warming, not at all. We have been horrible stewards of our planet. Anybody who denies that is not living in reality, not at all. But what is the even bigger factor in relation to the fires that we're not being told about? From the LA Times, wildfires are just the beginning of what Californians can expect. We know what's coming as the effect of climate change becomes more pronounced. The state will have to contend with more floods, coastal erosion, and deadly heat waves. Intense weather will overwhelm existing public and private infrastructure unless we adapt now and build more resilient communities. Yes, technology will save us. Question: how's that going so far? Not so well. Another question: what is absent from all official narratives on the state of the climate? The climate engineering factor. What is by far the biggest and most dire untold story in the world today, indeed in the history of the human race? Over 70 years of planetary decimating climate engineering, aka weather warfare operations. Another question: how much longer can the climate engineering elephant in the sky be hidden in plain sight? Consider this new report from phys.org. Along the lines of what I just mentioned, techno-fix futures will only accelerate climate chaos. Don't believe the hype. End of headline from phys.org. Technology is killing us, and the misuse of that technology, and the notion that yet more technology will save us from what technology again has already done to us, is simply delusion. Climate engineering and the core part it is playing in the epic wildfires occurring all over the globe continues to be the subject that is not mentioned, and thus not understood by the population. The climate science community's continual denial of the climate engineering factor is far beyond criminal at this point. And though there are countless forms of human activity damaging the planet and the climate system, in regard to the unprecedented wildfires occurring all over the globe, climate engineering operations, which are inarguably a form of weather warfare, are the core causal factor that is fueling the fires. The source of ignition for the fires is not the point. What has set the stage for the fires to burn with such ferocity? That is the point. Geoengineering is completely disrupting the hydrological cycle, the rain. Geoengineering operations are toxifying our rain, and thus affecting the root systems in forests due to the toxic heavy metals that are seeded into clouds from the geoengineering operations. Geoengineering is destroying the ozone layer, which kills trees from the top down. Geoengineering is ionizing the atmosphere, creating more dry lightning, again with a reduced rain cycle on top of that. The particulates from climate engineering are incendiaries, starting with aluminum and barium. That incendiary dust coats the forest foliage, the forest floor, structures, and everything else. And again, for the record, and we will release this footage in the coming documentary, The Dimming, we have time-lapse film footage of massive geoengineering aerosol spray dispersions being carried out directly over the smoke bank for the Paradise Fire. What was that about? It's certainly not about solar radiation management, as we're told these spray dispersions are about. Why would they be spraying so heavily directly on top of that fire?
My God, were we bombarded this year or what? With chemtrails, not contrails which disappear, condensation trails, chemtrails that don't disappear if they come out the back of these bloody aircraft. They stay around and they come out and eventually drop to the earth, and they have strontium, they have aluminium, they have barium. It's acidifying water, it's acidifying the land, and it is causing tremendous impacts on human health. Cumulatively, again, the coal. But it's doing something else. In the HARP patents and specifications, etc., in the description of a researcher describing and summarizing what it said this: dispersed metallic particles such as aluminium, barium, and strontium, the main chemical ingredients of chemtrails, or ingredients of chemtrails, may increase the atmosphere's conductivity and therefore enhance HARP's weather modification performance. So it's doing that as well. So where am I going with this? Well, I'm going here. Dr. Richard Day, 1969, the weather will be modified and used as a weapon of war to create drought or famine. A weapon of war against who? In Agenda 21 terms, a weapon of war against the small farmers, landowners, and growers of the world, not least in America. Also, in 2011 and other times, we've had these extraordinary forests of tornadoes. It was about 300 in a period of 3 days at one point. I think it was 2011. And that, of course, is devastating rural communities and what have you. Creating tornadoes with HARP technology, child's bloody play. And when the farmers and growers collapse, in come the big agribusiness people, the network, to take over the land for cents on the dollar. And this guy said, the system is broken. It was built this way. Of course it was.
Everything nature is, everything nature does, is regenerative. In complete contrast, the very foundation of industrialized, militarized society is the destruction of nature, of the natural world, in order to achieve an unimaginably temporary material gain, grinding up the web of life for a geologic moment of power and profit. For far too many in the ranks of the human race, the current paradigm is so alluring, so mesmerizing. They can't seem to see or comprehend that we are collectively on the cusp of near-term planetary omnicide. To many or most in the first world nations, the constructs of so-called civilization seem permanent, a notion which could not be further from the truth. From the tallest skyscrapers to shiny new cars and the latest electronic gadgetry, all will very soon be abandoned relics on a dying planet. But even now, with the ever-darkening horizon looming before us like an unstoppable tidal wave, most, so far, cannot or will not open their eyes. It seems the sky could be on fire and their gaze would remain downward toward the new iPhone or the new car. How did it come to pass that our collective priorities drifted so far from the path of reason, even from the path of our own near-term survival?
The science investigates the natural environment. It also modifies it. And that modification may have incalculable consequences for evil as well as for good. In the past, the problem of conservation has been mainly the problem of human waste, of natural resources, of their destruction. But science has the power for the first time in history to undertake experiments with premeditation which can irreversibly alter our biological and physical environment on a global scale. The problem is difficult because it is hard to know in advance whether the cumulative effects of a particular experiment will help or harm mankind.
It's gonna be a turkey shoot.
D-Wave is a very well-known manufacturer of quantum computers.
This is what they look like. There are two of them. These are from our lab in Burnaby in British Columbia. From the outside, they look like giant black monoliths. And they are powered, they have a fridge inside them, a refrigerator that cools these chips to almost absolute zero. Hundreds of times colder than interstellar space. Amongst the coldest and most isolated and extreme conditions that humans have ever been able to engineer. These fridges, interestingly enough, which are called pulse tube dilution refrigerators, have a thing called a pulse tube, which emits a sound roughly once per second, which sounds eerily like a heartbeat. So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it is an awe-inspiring thing, at least for me. It feels like an altar to an alien god. They really are impressive machines.
Their website is dwavesys.com. Scroll down here just a little, the very first customer listed is Lockheed Martin. And if you don't know, Lockheed Martin is a U.S. government defense contractor who is up to their eyeballs in geoengineering patents, and they do the weather modeling for the FAA.
Technology that enables cars to drive themselves. Routine flights to Mars. Fusion reactors that produce limitless energy. To most people, they're pure science fiction from the world of tomorrow, like something out of a movie. But at Lockheed Martin, we live on the cutting edge of physics, material science, technology, and engineering. We obsess over things most people only imagine.
All these undocumentable adjustments that are going on primarily within the Pentagon. There are two institutions that you are identifying as having certainly virtual total knowledge. Yeah, so the New York Federal Bank is one, Federal Reserve Bank, and then the other is the lead contractor for the Pentagon, which we don't have a name for that.
So Lockheed Martin is the #1 contractor to the U.S. government by about 25 to 50% on any given year. And they are the lead weapons manufacturer selling things to the Department of Defense, but they are also running the information and payment systems. Or
I didn't know.
They're largest.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Talk about a conflict of interest.
Wow.
Now, the other company that I wanted to take a look at today is Raytheon.
We see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these two U.S. Navy vessels. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons."
Raytheon, as you may or may not know, does the weather modeling for the National Weather Service, as well as NOAA. Now, Raytheon is not listed on the D-Wave website as a customer. However, if you go to their website and just peruse around a little bit, you will see that they are heavily in to quantum computing, and in fact have done videos and written articles about that very issue. And we do know at least one more customer through Anthony Patch's research that China is also an owner of a D-Wave quantum computer. And we do know that other U.S. government agencies are not listed. Google is not listed, but they also own a quantum computer, as does Amazon. So just keep that in mind when you're looking through the website here. Just know that it's not all going to be there, but some information's there, and that's really all we need to be able to connect a few dots. Now, when you spend your $10 million and you buy a quantum computer, what you get as a benefit is a forever upgrade. So if you buy into the quantum computer system at a certain model, then you get the next model upgrade automatically. So if you buy in at however many qubits, then when the next one comes out, you get the next upgrade. So that's a pretty good benefit of having a quantum computer, because you're going to always have the latest, greatest information. And one more aspect of this is that you have to keep in mind that D-Wave quantum computers, no matter where they are in the world, are networked together, sharing information. So let's go to our interview with Anthony Patch now, and let's talk about how specifically D-Wave quantum computers are directly tied to the ongoing global geoengineering/climate engineering programs, and how it's being used to weaponize these systems on a global scale.
When they're publicly acknowledging on their websites, Lockheed and Raytheon, that they are providing services to the FAA and they're providing services to NOAA, those are classical transistor-based computer systems. The applications of those models is relatively elementary, but what they are trying to do with planet Earth, specifically with the weather, is so complex that it requires quantum computing, and therefore it goes beyond conjecture to say that quantum computers are actually being used in this weapons system and this geoengineering of the planet. So it goes beyond traditional meteorological forecasting. It actually goes to pattern recognition and steering those patterns towards the goals that they have in mind that they're trying to achieve, be they military goals or engineering of the planet for population control, population diaspora, what have you. You want to apply your weapon system in a targeted fashion. You don't want to just blanket an area, because you may have what would be considered friendlies, collateral damage, collateral victims. And so the targeting, the steering of the weather requires extremely complex models for that targeting to then be where you want it, when you want it. The bottom line is, again, in a simple kind of introductory way, they can run with a quantum computer many, many more models in a very short period of time, as compared to the time that it would take a supercomputer in the classical sense to run those same models, if the supercomputer was even able to process as many of the variables that a quantum computer can do. We're now talking about steering the weather much like you would aim a laser system or a artillery piece or a missile system.
What we have built is a global national security state, which is fantastically expensive. And there are many different component parts, from the underground bases to the secret space program. But essentially, it's I call it the tapeworm. It is a financial parasite that is simply, harvesting and destroying great parts of the economy. If you go back to the history of the black budget, back to 47 and 49, what you have is this rapacious secret operations that are constantly demanding more and more money. And of course, the more you build and invest in them, the more they demand. So underground bases require maintenance. Global spraying requires more spraying. If there's a secret space program, spaceships get old and need to be replaced. So this thing seems to compound and grow over time.
And we literally saw with FASB 56, we have an overt economy and a covert economy, and the covert economy and the hidden system of finance just basically took over everything. Now, we've been watching this for years. So for years, people have been complaining as the secret money rolled into Wall Street, and increasingly took over the media industry and other industries. We've seen complaint of the dirty money rolling in and, building the offshore havens. And so this has been going on for a long, long time, because the $21 trillion missing from the federal government since fiscal 1998 is just part of this growth of a secret national security state.
All right, so you have raised the specter of some of the things that could be enabled with this type of money. For example, underground bases, spraying programs, secret space program, things that sound far-fetched to anyone who thinks, obviously, there must be a financial infrastructure for this. We'd see it in the books. Well, no, we cannot see it in the books. That's the point. What do we know and what do we not know about where this money is actually going?
We don't know. First of all, we don't know how much money this really is in terms of cash or credit, hard credit, because some of the money could be revenues and some expenses. So, for example, we could be occupying Iraq and Afghanistan and taking very valuable minerals and oil out of them, selling the oil and laundering the money back through, or the drug sales back through DOD. I became convinced after many, many years of research that drug money was being laundered through the HUD accounts. So some of this could be revenues, some of this could be expenditures. We don't know. What we do know is there's plenty of anecdotal information that documents that there are extraordinary expenditures going on in terms of underground bases. Now, could that money be clawed through the black budget in the DOD budget? There's a process where money can be clawed out of different agencies and taken into a black budget and is not disclosed because it's a sort of secret budget. So could all those underground bases have been funded from the black budget? Yes, but they could also have been funded from this. When the Kennedy assassination happened, if you look at the rise and the percentage of space expenditures as a portion of the budget and the GDP, what happened is after that it started to fall. What I believe is, in fact, it continued, they just took it dark. And this, these various forms of disappearing or missing money was one of the ways they funded. So I happen to believe that there's tremendous expenditure spent on space that we don't see. If you look at globalization could happen, James, because we had the global satellite infrastructure necessary to ensure enforcement. No investor puts money any place where they cannot enforce. And it was the global satellites and whatever our presence was in space that was very, very critical to allowing globalization and that kind of investment to happen. But the other thing we know is we have tremendous evidence of all sorts of unusual spaceships flying around the planet. And what I've said to various people is, that's $150 trillion of hardware. Where'd it come from? Somebody built it, right? So if you simply look at the kind of hardware that's floating around the planet and flying around the planet and the high technology, it doesn't take a big intuitive leap to say, I'll bet you we built some of it.
Yeah. And even what is on the record that we know that we don't know, the classified space shuttle flights that we know nothing about what they were up there for, or the X-37B, which they like to tout as, well, this mysterious space plane that we don't know anything about, just came back from its latest 2-year mission or whatever it is. But that's what we know that we don't know.
So let me bring up another one. Global spraying, I believe, is one of these expenses. Because no matter where you are in the world, when you sort of watch the spraying and try and count up, okay, how many planes, how many pilots, how much would the spray cost? And you just make a wild, we call it a WAG estimate, wild ass guess. We're talking about something which is fantastically expensive. And so my guess is that some of this money has gone into global spraying.
Hi guys, it's Claudia with Cabin Talk, and as many of you know, I had my snow tested, or I sent my snow in for testing few weeks ago, because my dogs could no longer walk on that snow that was falling, and it wasn't even that cold. It was 20 degrees, which in Vermont is nothing, and my dogs are Vermont dogs, so it doesn't affect them usually at all. And my dogs could barely walk 100 feet without lifting their paws, like if it would be 20 below and their feet were burning. So I took a sample of my snow. I put a stainless steel bowl outside and let it snow into it because a lot of snow was falling, and then let it melt and send it to a lab. So that's the preface of this talk. So the results came back, and I'm not a chemist, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a biologist, I'm not any of that, but the results are really interesting and saddening. So there are levels like the minimum detectable level, and then there is the reporting level when it needs to be reported. So I'm going to go through all four of those. I'm going to start with sulfur. Minimum detectable level is 20. Reporting level would be 100. I had 58. So I'm somewhere in the middle. We have strontium. Minimum is 0.1. Reporting level is 0.5. I had 0.4. So just under the reporting level. Barium, again, minimum is 0.1, reporting is 0.5, I had 0.6. So those are all a little high, but not shocking, but high. And then we have aluminum, which the minimum is 1.5, reporting level is 5.0, and I had 28.2. 28.2. This is in Vermont. I'm not anywhere near any chemical plants. I'm not anywhere near, I mean, this is like in the boonies, farming. There are no factories here. There is nothing around me, certainly no aluminum factories that could justify such a high aluminum level. And of course, what is up in the air every day above our heads is coming down, and it's coming down in our snow, it's coming down in our rain, it's coming down in our air, and it's going into our bodies that we breathe. You know, it's going into, and particles that small go right past the blood-brain barrier into our brain and wreak havoc there. There is a reason why Alzheimer's is one of the main causes of death now. And Alzheimer's, as one of the major universities, and I forgot which one it was, did a study that Alzheimer's without aluminum would not exist in a normal human lifetime up to 100 years. So the reason we have that is because it's added to our life. It's not always been there. You know, aluminum is not, yes, aluminum is the 7th most plentiful thing on Earth, but it's not in a form that is usually floating around in nanoparticulate size in our air. That is a man-made particle.
Hello everyone, this is Dark Journalist. Today I have a special interview with geoengineering author Ilana Freeland. Now Ilana has been researching the emerging technology menace known as the space fence, which was created by military contractors Lockheed Martin. In her book, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown, she describes a process where the planet itself is weaponized, and the air we breathe is converted into an antenna, so every human being becomes a walking electromagnetic tower. The space fence was introduced as far back as the 1960s, but was first deployed as part of President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI Star Wars. President Trump's moves towards a space force that will weaponize space and the launch of 5G technology towers are clearing the way to making the space fence fully operational. Is this the global control grid? Let's go ask Ilana Freeland. Ilana, it's great to have you back with us. Now, I absolutely loved your recent book, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown. It's so incredible in the sense that you put everything together there with unparalleled documented research. So much of this information has been strewn about in different corners of research and on the internet, but your work is a real refreshing collection of it all. Now I feel like I understand just how doomed humanity really is, so thank you for that. But seriously, the puzzle pieces that you've assembled here form a rich tapestry of information that we just didn't have before. So I guess the first question is, how did it all happen?
I've thought about it, and it was actually the first step, in a way, toward seeing how interconnected all this is. That it's not just the chemical trails, it's not just the ionospheric heaters, it's this space fence lockdown, it's this huge wireless lockdown on everything. And now slowly people are picking up that the vaccinations are involved, the GMOs are involved, and geoengineering is engaged in all of it. You can begin to see how they're going to arrive at transhumanism through the environment to guide us toward a transhumanist model. It may not be the end model that they want, but it will break us down. It's breaking down the immune system right now. And it's a matter of getting it to, first on a cellular level, degenerate us. Then the input will come. One of the more interesting uses, and I can't say this is one of the biggest ones, underground bases in Global Spring is pretty big. One of the things you see is all the different fraudsters and money networks seem to have a proclivity for investing in advanced research. So Madoff, some of the money that disappeared through Madoff went to MIT Brain Research. Some of the money that went through Epstein went to MIT Brain Research. And I happen to think that a lot of the political problems we're facing right now, the biggest one is mind control. And I think if you look at how much money has gone into manipulating human beings, manipulating their minds, accessing their minds, building the kind of NSA surveillance we know we have, you know, you're trying to build a global mind that can be centrally controlled. And I think a fantastic amount of money has gone into that research.
Absolutely. And that ties into the DARPA Brain Initiative and also serial scamsters like Elon Musk and his Neuralink and things like that. Yeah.
I used to have a friend who was very knowledgeable about Musk and the people around him who kept saying, look, Musk is very, very dark. You know, there's very serious occult things going on here. You have to, you know, pay attention and not quote Musk. This was all to justify me not quoting Musk. And then when I watched his Neuralink speech,
I do want to emphasize that it's not going to be like suddenly Neuralink will have this incredible neural lace and start taking over people's brains. Okay. It will take a long time. Getting FDA approval for implantable or devices of any kind is quite difficult, and this will be a slow process where we will gradually increase the issues that we solve until ultimately we can do a full brain-machine interface, meaning that we can ultimately, this is going to sound pretty weird, but achieve a sort of symbiosis with artificial intelligence. So, but this is not a mandatory thing. This is a thing that you can choose to have if you want. And this is something I think that's going to be really important at a civilization level scale. So, and I've said a lot about AI over the years, but I think even in a benign AI scenario, we will be left behind. And so, and hopefully it is a benign scenario, But I think with a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, I think we can actually go along for the ride. And we can effectively have the option of merging with AI. I think this is extremely important.
That's a man on a leash. But it was one of the most bizarre speeches I've ever watched in my life, and I've seen a lot of bizarre speeches.
There are kind of jokes that go around on the internet that he's some sort of cyborg or something, but it really does make you wonder what exactly his brain is on.
This phased array antenna setup is able to target, and really work as a mesh would be how I'd like to present it. And this was just an intuition after spending lots of time on this, that when Elon Musk talks about neural mesh, he makes it sound like it's just going to be in your brain, it's going to protect you from AI, blah, blah, blah. But the real neural mesh that's being built is really the smart city plan and activation. And that has to do with all the things we're breathing in. We're breathing in from the chemical trails, just from the chemical trails. We're breathing in, as we know, the conductive heavy metals on a nano scale. A nano is 1 billionth of a meter. You cannot see it. And it's extremely effective, extremely cheap to produce, and it's in everything now. It's in medicines, it's in deodorant, it's in women's cosmetics, it's in new clothes.
There's research prototypes now, which I assume are being used by intelligence agencies, of very small electronic circuits that you can just put in paper or put in paint or on the walls that are powered by the GSM stations. And they operate as the GSM radio wave passes through them. It gives them enough power for a very small amount of time to do things. So obviously that tendency is going to continue. It's not like the Internet of Things. It's if you like, intelligent evil dust scattered everywhere, like confetti in everything. So I think it's increasingly hard for human beings to work out how to deal with that.
So what are we entering here with the nanotechnology? That's my question. So now let's go back to the human beings. We have inhaled conductive metals, aluminum, barium, strontium, chromium, titanium, lithium, etc., from the chemical trails being used to keep enough particulate matter in the atmosphere that is conductive that they can constantly ionize whatever they need in order to do all their wireless operations. And one of the most important, as you know, is weather, do the weather engineering.
So it's doing that as well.
But now if all that is now inhaled by us into our lungs, it goes then into the bloodstream, it goes through the walls of the lungs, through the heart, it goes through all the blood, and eventually ending up at the brain, where the blood-brain barrier, which has protected us to a degree from maybe micron level, chemicals and pathogens, etc., is no sweat for the nanoparticle. It just slips right in there. So now we have, our brains are full of nanoparticles, our bodies are full of nanoparticles. We have the heavy metal problem, which all goes all the way from Alzheimer's to what's going on with children now and autism.
Yes.
We have all the new so-called diseases, which I believe are actually symptoms of the autoimmune diseases, chronic fatigue, etc. All of this is connected to this nanoparticle matrix that has been laid in us. And did they know this, or are we just okay, we're going to lose a few humans, but we've got to have this technology for our secret space program? Well, no, I used to think that initially. I thought,
So we're just collateral damage. But no, we're not. No, this is very much about a transhumanist singularity future.
They were transhumanists. They were looking forward, and through and up was their kind of attitude in different ways. But now we're in this situation where if the secular idea of progress once held that place, nobody really believes that anymore. And if the people do, it's at the very least naive and often kind of pernicious. I mean, Silicon Valley still tries to, make money or get attention or whatever by going, oh, there's a new thing, we can make an improvement, it's going to progress, we'll have a better, and you're like, no, look, all this technology you produced has all these unintended consequences that just make the world more chaotic, more confusing, and more irritating. Like, I find the everyday life with technology incredibly irritating because it's just all this crappy software and pushes and things that are trying to trick you into like joining their thing, and you sense this kind of algorithmic like parasites that are just like waiting to eat your every decision. I mean, it's a very dystopian situation.
They're plugging us in cell by cell, thanks to the nanoparticles, that some of which are now in vivo. They're alive in here. They replicate. They have features of non-biological entities and biological entities. They have a certain hive mind intelligence. They're very unique as far as parasites go. We're going to move from molecular biology to digital biology. To move to digital means to move actually to the wireless radio frequency and microwave and everything else. And that's the key. That's the key that tells you what they have in mind for us. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to get that. But how they're doing it is what has escaped everyone, because everyone still has all these different problems, wireless technology, vaccinations, GMOs, etc., in different categories. And so they're not able to see that we're basically being plugged in. I think the first thing that happened that really got people's attention was the 5G. Yes. That this will be plugged in because it's been allowed to be talked about with some of the components that are most worrisome to those who understand what millimeter waves do, and what phased array antennas do, because those are the two really unique aspects of the 5G technology as it's being presented.
A few months ago, RT America, the News with Rick Sanchez, the news show here on this channel, did some reporting on the health concerns of 5G wireless, the next wave of wireless technology that soon will be across our society and many nations around the world. And basically the reporting just made clear, the reporting by the news show just made clear that 5G is pretty untested. Many scientists and doctors have grave concerns and just believe that it should be far more tested before it is shot through all of our bodies, not to mention animals, insects, plants, everything. Let's figure out what it does. That's all the reporting really did. And for doing that reporting, the New York Times came after them with a large expose titled, "Your 5G phone won't hurt you, but Russia wants you to think it will." Oh my God, this must be Drago from Rocky, right? Russians are gonna get you. Now, we'll ignore for a second that none of the reporting done was by Russians. Let's just ignore that. And at least not on Rick Sanchez's show. And we want to even, we won't even spend that much time on the fact that now even one of the top scientific periodicals in the nation, Scientific American, says they have no reason to believe 5G is safe for you. They say quite clearly that even though the technology is coming, it's contrary to what people say, there could be health risks. There you go, Scientific American. So we won't even get into how royally New York Times fucked that up. But let's get into why the New York Times felt the need to write a giant hit piece defending 5G technology and declaring anyone who dare ask whether more testing needs to be done must be a Russian agent. And see, now right now, the smart kids at home, you know the answer right now. A lot of you out there, you know what I'm about to say. Could it be that the New York Times gets some of their funding from a corporation connected to 5G technology? No! You would, that would be insane. Because if that were the case, that would be a massive conflict of interest in their reporting. That would be just a shitstorm of garbage reporting. They would never do that. Well, here is this week's New York Times. All right, this is from this Monday. Let's see what we find inside here. Let's flip just a few pages, okay? This is the second page of the New York Times from this week. Let's see. Giant 5G ad. Right there, a fourth of a page, all right? Giant 5G Verizon advertisement. Let's go another page. Giant 5G Verizon advertisement. One more page. Giant 5G Verizon advertisement. Oh, let's go another page. Giant 1/4 of a page 5G Verizon advertisement.
Nobody's talking about the fact that something has already been introduced that is very serious, and that is the cell phone. The cell phone is a military weapon. I don't own one purposefully. I make a joke that I'm not that important, that the military needs to know where I am 24/7.
This is our man-in-the-middle device. It's basically a Wi-Fi network that these phones are going to connect to once we turn their Wi-Fi on. It's going to pass data through it on the way to Google. But on the way, we're actually going to get a copy of the same data that Google's going to get. The phone that wasn't on airplane mode registered more than 100 locations, 130 activities, and even 152 barometric readings. And even 152 barometric readings. As soon as it hooked up to our Wi-Fi, it transmitted 300 kilobytes of data straight to Google. The phone even logged our exact locations, tracking us all around town. Now you may notice what's missing here is the exact route that we took, but it got that data too. It knows when I got out of the car. So you're thinking, this isn't a big deal, I'll just put my phone in airplane mode. Yeah, we thought of that too. This is the other phone that we had with us that no SIM card also remained in airplane mode the entire time. Let's see what kind of data it captured. The phone with airplane mode activated actually logged more locations and activities than the other phone, and it also transferred hundreds of kilobytes of data to Google as soon as it was activated.
I really feel that it's being used primarily with the Internet of Things in the cars, in the houses, to really pulse us with frequencies that are mood altering, thought altering, and all of this is getting us used to being plugged in and having the frequencies in someone else's control. We don't know that, we think it's us, and that's a real first step to getting us accustomed to being run remotely without knowing it. What we all know is that for the masters of the universe here that live on planet Earth and are attempting to escape it while destroying it, and I don't think of aliens when I think of that. I think of very wealthy, very intelligent, very educated people who seemingly have abandoned their humanity, the best parts of humanity, compassion, wisdom, they have abandoned that. And so if we go back to, again, another scientific fact, that nature abhors a vacuum. So that place where their humanity used to live, perhaps in their conscience, in their heart area, in their brain, wherever, there's a vacuum there. So something will fill it, and it will be something that is not human. Now, whether we want to get into an argument over aliens versus demons, to me, they're all the same. They're anti-human because they have no understanding of what it is to be human. The vacuum in them may be filled with entities that despise humanity, but they are in charge to a great degree on this planet now.
The top 1% of the top 1%, the guys that play God without permission.
Cree Native Americans named Wetiko as a cannibalistic entity taking over the mind in an insatiable and lethal embrace. Wetiko is characterized as a psychic starvation that leads to an insatiable hunger.
Native American philosopher Jack Forbes further adds, "This disease, this Wetiko, cannibal psychosis, is the greatest epidemic sickness known to man. We as a species are in the midst of a massive psychic epidemic, a virulent collective psychosis that has been brewing in the cauldron of humanity's psyche from the beginning of time. The Wetiko is simply a living link in a timeless, vampiric lineage of abuse. Full-blown Wetikos induce and dream up others to experience what it is like to be the part of themselves which they have split off from and denied, and are thus not able to consciously experience the part of themselves that has been abused and vampirized. In playing this out, Wetikos are transmitting and transferring their own depraved state of inner deadness to others in a perverse form of trying to deal with their own suffering. Paradoxically, Wetikos both try to destroy others' light as it reminds them of what they've killed in themselves, while simultaneously trying to appropriate the light for themselves. The disease itself is now demanding that we pay attention to it, or it will kill us."
Ghislaine Maxwell grew up in a 53-room mansion. Her father was Robert Maxwell, a media and press baron who owned the Mirror News Group in England and also the New York Daily News. He was a former Mossad agent.
Mossad agent? I thought they were Israeli.
According to my source, Ari Ben-Mashari, the business that Robert Maxwell had was turned over to Jeffrey Epstein almost in a switch before Robert Maxwell died in mysterious circumstances off the back of a boat in 1991. It turns out that Robert Maxwell had run into trouble and stolen more than $1 billion from his businesses and his employer's pension funds to keep his empire afloat.
We're going to have to finally come to terms with what being human is, so that we know what we're defending. You have to fight tooth and nail to stay awake, first of all. Well, to get awake, first of all, and stay awake. Then take hold of some things within your particular gifts and your particular reason you came to planet Earth this time, and get busy and do everything you can. Just pushing off your fear, your anxiety, your dreams of having been whatever, and really invest in the future of humanity, because I seriously think that it is now in peril.
In a toxic, dysfunctional family system, the outcast is often just the person who sees through everyone else's bullshit. In a toxic, planet-spanning mass enslavement system, the outcasts are often just the people who see through the billionaire oligarchs' narrative control matrix, where bullshit is flung at us on a far greater scale. So are we all inhaling heavy metal nanobots that will wirelessly jack us into some quantum computer network super AI hive mind without even asking us to sign a waiver for Elon's Neuralink surgery first? I can't be sure. It's still too early to tell. But by the time we get scientific confirmation that it's happening, it'll already be too late. If you think that having an augmented, ionized brain will make you feel frolicsome and free, with always-on, unlimited 5G access for a steep monthly fee to a completely immersive, pornified Disney on-demand virtual reality, well, then you just haven't been paying attention. The hive mind-powered VR of the future will likely suck just as hard as working a warehouse job at Amazon sucks right now.
Next!
Like any digital platform, it'll demand lots of mind-numbing toil for scant real-world rewards. It'll also demand the last tattered shreds of your personal sovereignty.
Society has been gradually darkened by this scheme in which everyone is under surveillance all the time, and everyone is under this mild version of behavior modification all the time.
We're manipulating you and then pawning you off on advertisers. Like prey. This is what they're doing to people. And worse, they're actually trying to change historical narratives and lock them in place digitally into people's minds through programming. This is terrible. It is worse than Orwell.
No more independent investigations or critical thinking for you, little hamster. The Technocracy's Robert Behrens will tell you, from deep inside your own skull. We have machines to do that for you now. Welcome to the new electromagnetic upgrade of MK Ultra Mind Control.
It's a mechanical approach to manipulating people, and because it's so algorithmic, it doesn't involve direct communication, and people don't get the cues to understand what's happening with them.
The heedless nerd kings on the cutting edge of computer science say we're hurtling toward one inevitable goal: the singularity, when artificial superintelligence finally surpasses human intelligence and then exponentially ramps up beyond it. If we're somehow lucky enough to achieve symbiosis, we'll get a chance to clomp around as enhanced cyborgs, jacked into the superintelligence's hyper-networked hive mind. But once we're locked into that cyborgian straitjacket, what happens if the hive mind starts crawling with algorithmic bugs? What if those superintelligent machines start fucking with us? When our hive mind OS gets hijacked by unstoppable quantum computer viruses or accidental downloads of mass freakout-inducing malware, as it must in this public good sabotaging world of corporate profit chasers,
Shut it down!
the only way to reboot will be to kill everyone off.
Shut it down forever!
Wake the fuck up, America.